James Allan, founder of CityXcape, an app dedicated to helping people find hidden gems, urban exploration through technology and the blockchain. Welcome today to the Learning with Lowell show. Here's a quick teaser from the episode.
One thing you realize, everyone who's gotten rich, they've gotten rich by riding a wave. So street cred is literally mined by people exploring the streets, whether it's finding new data in the streets or validating data in the streets. Context, not just connection. When people are walking the streets, man, they don't realize that the city is a hive. Cityscape is showing you the city in real time. If all of a sudden you look at the feed and there's a bunch of people checking in at this location, you know where the crowd is. But let's be honest here, the streets, there's potential danger. That's part of the streets.
Essentially, we dig very deeply into his app, why he built it, the dangers and pitfalls, and his vision for the future, among other topics. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe, like, and comment. It all adds up. Let's stay curious and learn more about James Allan of CityXcape. How you teach math with real world carpentry type stuff. I mean, it's very interesting. I used to build houses, so.
Right. So I remember we were creating a corner desk, and it was a corner desk. So you have one wall, and I told the guy, like, cut a board for that. So we're gonna create a corner desk or whatever. And he was like, well, how long should I cut the board? And I looked at him. I was like, well, you know what to do. And he's like, what do you mean you know what to do? I don't. And I'm like, A square, one wall, plus B square is equal what? C square, right? And then he's like, oh, so like, I felt like that's a classic example in carpentry where, like, he knew that equation, but he didn't know like how to apply it like in like real life, so to say, so like that was like, I think that moment when it hit me, like, oh, okay, like this guy knows these formulas, but he doesn't know like how they relate to like the real world. So one of the things math is used for, right? It's a language where you could only describe certain things in that language, right? So if I tell you cut something like 1/16 of an inch, I cannot use any other language but numbers to tell you that. Let's just say like a poor guy's walking down the streets, something come down and crashes on him, kills him, and you don't know how heavy that object is, or you're trying to describe the weight of that object. So you say, well, that object was like the weight of 2 washing machines. When I'm like, well, what kind of washing machines? Is it Samsung's? Well, no. Well, it was like about half the size of a car. Well, what car? SUV, a truck? So as opposed to if I tell you this thing weighs half a ton, it's very precise. You get exactly what I'm talking about. So math is simply a way to describe things that you cannot describe in words. Normal language is way too inaccurate for the mathematical description of it, right? So that's all it is. And in carpentry, as you're using measurements, and you're using common difference, and you're using elevation, you're using angles. We talked about slope, steepness. You're using all these elements, which are basic algebra. And as you encounter these problems, you have to use math to solve them. And then as you use math to solve a carpentry problem, you understand how it relates to you. Another example, by the way, is animation. I write a lot of animation code, and a lot of these animation code, you're using math to keep things proportionate. You're using timing functions to move things in space, right? And like, unless you've actually used them practically to create an animation, a lot of these geometries or these trigonometries you use, you don't really know how it's relevant to you, right? Like, I don't know if you remember your trigonometry. You have sine x plus cosine x is equal what? R square, right? R theta. So like, how does that translate in a Cartesian coordinate, right? If I remember, sine x was y, cosine x was x, right? So what is the last one? E is equal to what? Z square. That's like the depth of it. But you could express that in pi radiant. You can express that in pi radiant. And then from this equation, you could derive all sorts of trigonometric formulas to see how to plot something in like, a computer, especially if you're writing like a lot of front end code. This is like a little bit more elaborate example, but the point that I'm trying to say is, as you use math to do things, you see it becomes concrete objects in your head rather than like abstractions. And until you practically use math for these things, they're just like giant abstractions to you that, you won't necessarily understand what it's about. I don't know if you get it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I do front end coding a lot with what I'm building,
Right.
and it involves 3D animation in the browser.
Right.
So
What are you using, by the way?
to build it. What do you mean?
Yeah, yeah. What are you using to build it?
Oh, just straight. It's all built on JavaScript, like
Okay,
React
okay.
JavaScript, and there's
Dope,
like a
dope.
couple of libraries that make it easy. There's one called 3JS, which I really like, but it
Right,
just
right,
makes everything kind of like vector math. And then to animate stuff, it's really easy to just update the canvas, which has all the stuff in
right,
them and whatnot. So that's that. I think coding is one of those areas where you can really see the applicability of math.
right.
Um, Carpenter is one of them. Have you ever met someone? I think this is like I'm somewhat touching on something we discussed previously to this, but have you ever met someone who you could get to have practical applications of math who didn't end up enjoying it? If someone like really like, but then like we're like really self-selecting in of survivorship bias about someone who would be open to hearing it, to be open to see a real world application example of it. But I think so. There it's a pretty small pie, but I think I would imagine that every person you meet who's willing to do that would end up enjoying that approach to learning math.
No, no, because I think there's certain math where it's no longer enjoyable for some people. I think when you start to get to like perhaps calculus or even pre-calculus, where you're dealing with hyperbolas or parabolas, or when you're dealing with limits, is things approaches zero and it goes to infinity. Or if I were to tell someone, how would you explain what a derivative is, for an example, a very simple concept, the rate of change. But how do you apply that? So the rate of change of velocity is acceleration. I don't know if you see that. The rate of change of distance in time is speed. The rate of change of
Mm,
speed is acceleration. That's the second derivative of that. Or another example would be the rate of change of work is power, because you know, work is force times distance. Power is basically how much work you do per second. So that's just the derivative of work is power, right? So at this level, I think once you start getting to these level of abstractions, and that's very simple calculus, right? That's level one calculus. We're not even talking about like any transforms or something like that. I'm sure if you've taken calculus 2, you've dealt with, a Fourier transform. If you dealt with calculus 3, you've dealt with Laplace transforms. Even
I'm not there
more.
yet. I'm
Well,
excited to get there though. Yeah.
oh, okay, okay. Well, like a Laplace transform, it basically takes um uh it takes a multivariate equation and turns it into a
Mm-hmm.
linear equation, right? It turns things into simple linear equations. I think your cochlear is actually doing a transform. It takes complex sounds and basically breaks them down into simple sine waves, the sum of
Mm-hmm.
simple sine waves. So that's a transform. But that's I think that's calculus 2 or 3. But what I'm trying to say is this: like once you start getting to like abstractions, and calculus is very abstract, right? You're talking about the rate of change. You're talking about the limit of something as it approaches a certain value. Um, this is very abstract, right? And some people, they don't have that kind of abstraction power. They're much more hands-on. So I have met people who, once they start reaching that level of abstraction, math is terribly unenjoyable to them, and
Mm-hmm.
they would rather back to crunching numbers, because algebra and trigonometry and so on, it's all about manipulating equations, as opposed to like calculus. When you're doing things like related rates, for an example, you're solving very interesting problems. A lot of it's abstract, and if you can't visualize it, it's very tough. So yes, I have met people who because you are giving them real applications of mathematics, because like I said, how your car determines your acceleration is by taking the first derivative of your speed, right? The rate of change of your speed is your acceleration. So that's a real life application of calculus every day while you're driving. But at that level, people don't enjoy math, because like, what do you mean, like the rate of change? Another way to look at the derivatives, by the way, is you don't even have to see it as a rate of change. You could look at the derivative as a way of turning a non-linear, of determining the slope of a non-linear equation at a particular point. So, if you have a straight line, you could easily calculate the slope, rise over run, easy. But let's just say you have like a squiggly line that's all over.
Mm-hmm.
That line has no slope. You can't really say it has an incline or a decline or it's flat because it's non-linear. Derivative allows you to find the slope of a non-linear equation at a very specific point, right? That's another real life practical application of derivative. So you could do enormous calculus with that kind of stuff, extremely powerful in all sorts of applications, from GPS to space. Like it's enormous. But again, what do you mean find the slope of a non-linear equation at a certain point? Too abstract for some people, and that turns them off, and they quickly steer away from math at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah. So but it does sound like there is a level where it is generally enjoyable, like beyond just 2 apples plus 2 apples equals 4 apples and just basic accounting. There's a level where it is kind of fun to know that you've seen.
I would say algebra.
Yeah, I think algebra is like it's a good way of thinking about like people too. I think people are kind of like algebraic equations, but maybe they're more like, maybe after I've learned more about calculus, I'll think that people are calculus equations because they change.
Why do you think people are algebraic equations? That's interesting.
Well, I mean, everyone's just like the sum. Like, so like you at every moment is like a sum. Like if someone's doing something, like, so let's say I kick a puppy, like I'm never gonna do that. Well, I guess if a puppy was attacking something or what, there's scenarios where I'd kick a puppy, but I don't want to do it. But
right.
Anyway, so you see me kick a puppy, that is what the equal. That's what like that is the right side of the equation, like summing up a behavior, and then the left side is all the variables that come up that equal up to the right side. And so if you understand enough of the left side equation, like x plus y, etc., you should have a pretty good approximation as for why I did something. And so if you look at people's behavior, and I do this all the time, if you can get close to the approximation of what, like, why someone's doing something, you can kind of like fit in it, like an algebraic equation to kind of guess why they've summed to that level. There are things where it's like you just don't have the answer to it, but then you can kind of like make observations, make hypotheses. You can kind of test that and tease it out in how you engage with people. But I mean that's what I mean. I think like people are just like, behaviors are very like have sub variables in them, and if you can sum them up right, you can get some sense of why someone's doing something. It works okay, like in the limit, like in specific examples. But if you have a longer period of time where you can observe people, and maybe like rate of change, I think that might be interesting. But how behaviors change over time, like I wonder how, like, I'm generally curious like how my brain will be affected once I've learned more about calculus. Now that you've talked about it, but that's more or less how I see everybody. Like if I'm perplexed at someone, if someone's doing something that I don't understand, it's like, okay, what's the variable that I don't understand that I missed here? Because if from the person's point of view, most people don't see themselves being as assholes or doing something bad. There's something about that behavior that makes sense to them.
Right.
And our brains are kind of programmed to be somewhat rational, even if like people aren't rational. And you can be emotional, but I think even emotions are somewhat rational in terms of like the way that they exhibit. Like anger exhibits itself in a certain a predictable pattern, like facial structures, etc. So that's what I mean.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100%.
Oh, thank you. Well, okay, cookie for Lowell. How do you use similar things for people? Do you ever look at people and like break them down in terms of like some type of math?
No, because there's too many unseen variables, right? There's too many unseen variables for me to basically lock people into an equation. But there is truth in a sense that, like, if you observe someone long enough, you can solve many of those variables and predict their behavior. I mean, we live in a deterministic universe, right? Meaning that this is a universe governed by law, that everything has a chain of cause and effect. So people are predictable, whether they like to think otherwise or not.
And people like patterns. Yeah. There's also like there's a level of there's some variables that do not matter, or like the consequence of them don't affect the overall equation too much. So like,
no, I think you only say that because there are unseen causes. People only seem unpredictable because there are causes that are unseen and unknown.
I think with time and observation, you could see enough of the approximate causes to understand why someone's doing what they're doing. I don't
Yeah,
think
but
there's
you'll
like
never
like
get a
people always say
complete
like
snapshot of the person.
no, and that's my sub point as well, which is I don't think you need a complete snapshot to get an approximate understanding of what someone's going to do. Like
Yeah,
there are many situations where I can guess what people are.
but the wild card behaviors will come from variables you haven't seen, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying you
Yeah.
need a complete snapshot for the person to be predictable. You
Okay.
don't. But when you
Yes.
do get these like wild card behaviors,
Ah,
it
okay.
is precisely because they are variables, they are unseen causes you miss. You don't have a complete snapshot. So of course there's going to be wild card behaviors. However,
I
if
see
you
your
had
point.
complete knowledge of the person, that person would be completely predictable to you. It would be an automaton.
Yeah.
But for you to have that, for you to be able to witness a person at that level, you would have to be God, and you're not.
Yes. Or Rehoboam from Westworld.
What is that?
Rehoboam. Rehoboam
Uh,
was a giant brain supercomputer that knew what everyone was doing and was keeping people in loops. The first two seasons of Westworld are pretty good.
okay.
After that, people can make fun of me all you want. The later seasons of Westworld are dumb. But Rehoboam was cool. I thought that was a neat concept. Basically, it was like controlling all humans, like what jobs you'd have if you would be killed or called or whatever. It was kind of neat. If you were like an outlier person, they would kill you. But the idea was it was keeping humanity from killing itself. I think that's where I think it's been hinted at that like in the Westworld universe, like all humanity is going to die out.
Right. I mean, who knows, right? No one knows.
Probably not. I think we'll
We
be
can
fine.
die. Yeah, we can. We can make it. We could fail. You know, it's
We're
anything
a young
goes.
species. I think
Right.
we're like quarter of a million years old. We're pretty young, but we
That's what the narrative is. Who knows how old humans really are? I don't believe
yeah.
that narrative.
How
I
old do you
don't
think
believe
humans are
that
then?
narrative. I have no idea. They could be humans could be millions of years old for all I know.
That's true.
But
The
you
evidence so
know,
far supports quarter. I think.
well, no, well, there's a lot of cities that are under the ocean that supports a very different narrative, right? So there's huge fights in archaeology right now. Well, it has been for the past couple of decades as to how old the human species really is. But I'm not an expert in this subject, so I don't want to make any claims. I can't state
Yeah.
anything firmly. I don't know anything about this stuff.
Well, I think if you were to talk about like human civilization and it being older than it is, I think we would agree in terms of it being older than what people say it is. Like look at America. When we were, I'm assuming you're about my age. I'm 30. When
I'm
we were
35.
kids, all right, you about I give or take 5 years. When we were kids, like I think Native Americans coming to the U.S. was like they were thought to be like 8,000 years ago at most, and then it became 12,000, then it became 13,000, and now there's even stuff I think near Minneapolis. Oh, I just doxed you. I mean, I'll edit that out. I don't want to dox you.
You good?
I
You
feel
good?
horrible.
You good? You good? You good?
Uh,
People could know where
that's
I'm at.
okay. Well, especially if they're ladies, but that is
Mm-hmm.
support that like people might have come over like 50,000 years ago and built civilizations. Like even in the Amazon, there's reports that there might have been cities as big as 1 million. So like it's constantly being rewritten in one area. That is, it's kind of nice in terms of like there's not that many competing areas for people to come in. There's only like 3 or 4 different ways that people came to America.
Right.
In terms of like pre Columbian, you know, like no pre like Columbus, wherever the heck that term is. Which is my way of saying if you were to talk about civilization being older than it is, and we've been kind of like wiped and we rebuild a bunch of times, I could see that being true. I haven't seen anything that suggests that humans themselves could be older, but you know, there's a lot of you have to get really lucky for bones to last so long. DNA doesn't last that long, for instance.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm not an archaeology expert, so I'm gonna stay out of it. I just say like I don't buy the narrative, but I'm not gonna say humans are this number of years old. I just don't buy the narrative.
Yeah, you might like the book *Sapiens*. It kind of goes into it a little bit.
Oh, I hated it.
You didn't like it? What's wrong with it?
No. It was pop culture. It was like popish, you know, pop science type shit, you know.
Yeah, it's a survey course. You start there and then you drill down deeper.
Right.
It gives you like a landscape of opinions.
I read it. I read the whole thing. It was all right. It reminds me of a Malcolm Gladwell book, right? It's kind of like superficial intellectualism in a sense, you know. I'm not saying these guys aren't smart, but you know, it's I felt like these are like watered down books for the masses. It's not really for someone like me, you know what I mean? Like, you know, but I read it. It was all right. It was kind of wokish type of book too, in a weird way.
Really?
But yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, I'll have to read it. I don't know. I guess I don't. entirely know what wokeism is because I try to avoid that part of the internet because it sounds very
Uh,
annoying.
right. I'm not saying it was like on a woke sense, but I think Sapiens said a lot of things for woke points,
Hmm.
for that was with the trends. And
It's old though, right?
I will give the author credit where credit's due. I think he's a great writer. He's a phenomenal writer.
Yeah, it was fun.
And it was really an easy read. But again, it's not a deep book. It's not something that I wouldn't read it again, or I wouldn't recommend it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
What are
but
you? Yeah.
hmm?
Then what books do you chew on?
I don't read books anymore. I mean, I'm 35, and I think at my age, like you don't read books as much. Unless it's like related to work, I don't really read at all. So but when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I read a lot. I read a shit ton of books. I would read a book a week sometimes. I think it's a stage where you're absorbing information, but then after you absorb information, you start to build things, you start to do things, and you start to experiment, and you start to form your own. I feel like books give you a great base, but then once you have enough of a base, just do, and just do. And that's when everything connects and crystallizes, and you see what author was right, what author was wrong. So yeah, I think you're going to be at that stage in a couple of years, by the way. I think in a couple of years, I'm just making a prediction about you right now. I say 3 years, you're
We can
not
put
you're
money
not
on
going to
it.
be reading anything. You're not going to be reading anything. You're just going to be doing things, and you're going to be learning from experience. Let me make something clear. You know, books has information. Books has information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is experience, as you know, right? There's a
Yeah.
big difference between knowledge and information.
And
Knowledge is
wisdom.
experience. Information, like you could read a book about Italy. You have information on Italy. You don't know Italy. You only know Italy when you go there and live there for some certain period of time. But information, if you read about Italy, you have information on Italy. And information is extremely useful when you know what to do with it, right?
Hmm.
When you know how to use that information is extremely powerful. So I'm not saying information doesn't have its place, but books don't give you knowledge. They give you information. So if I need information on something, like I'm building something, I will read the docs. But if I'm looking for knowledge, I will have experience.
Yeah. So I see your point. I think there's, I I think people go in phases where they go from. I think of it like the metamorphosis of a butterfly, like being the larva, like eating tons of information, gathering information, and then you crystallize it into a more or less like a hypothesis or like an idea and like how to do something, and then you in your butterfly stage is just executing on that. For butterfly, it's just fucking, but for humans, it's
Right,
like
right,
building something or whatever.
right.
But that process I think is cyclical. Like I think it happens a lot. So like I balance doing with learning because I think that's really exciting to see how things connect. And then like I'm in several different areas, just like being personal. I'm in like biotechnology, agriculture, technology, and like a couple other areas. And so like you'd be surprised at things I learned in biotechnology that apply to tech or tech that apply to biotechnology. And so and some of it's coming from biographies and books and stuff that I'm reading, and some of it's just reading, just taking information from the internet. Um, but it's the different ways I apply it that then makes it so I can apply it in other areas. So, but that like the genesis of some things that you wouldn't even know about would go away if I didn't have books or any other way of like continuing learning in that way. So I think I would actually encourage you if you could just like to like read like a chapter a day in somewhat random thing. I think
Hell no.
especially given the fact that you're at a stage where you have so much capability to apply the knowledge, any new information you gain, ha- you have a higher chance of making use of it and making connections to what you already have.
Well, you got to understand, right? Like, just because I'm not reading books doesn't mean I'm not reading, right? As you
Mm,
know, I'm a developer, so I'm always reading docs. As a matter of fact, one of the things I started picking up was I started learning Haskell to write on a Cardano blockchain. And I have to do that every day, and you have to read a lot of docs, you have to go through a lot of tutorials. So also I have a YouTube channel where I teach history and I cover secret people, and when I cover secret people, I do
yeah, that's
research on
fun.
them. So I read up on them. So just because
Yeah,
I'm not reading books doesn't mean I'm not reading. I'm very busy with work, with computer science and history. So without a doubt, I'm still absorbing new information.
yeah,
I mean, if you look at my curriculum, every day I go through a playlist of mathematical stuff, computer science stuff. Yeah, and so it doesn't mean I'm not learning and but I just
Yeah, I
don't
hear
buy
you.
books and read them anymore because like
Yeah.
like
I
my mind is already formed in terms of like world viewpoint.
yeah, I think instead of reading, it's just like learning and trying new things, which is a part of your schedule. And it's
Right,
just
right.
reading books. To your point, is not how you get that anymore.
No,
But
no, because
yeah, yeah,
my work, I have to learn for a lot of like, okay, I could get complacent as an engineer and say, okay, like I'll wait till the ecosystem of Cardano is well developed, and then I'll learn how to write Haskell/Plutus so I could start writing smart contract on a blockchain. But I made the decision that okay, I'm gonna learn it now rather than later, so that I could be one of the engineers that's ahead of the pack in a sense, and that requires a lot of studying. You have to be very studious about that. So
yeah,
my work requires me because I'm forcing myself out of my element with my work, with what I do. I could be complacent as an engineer. Um, because I'm doing that, I'm pushing my boundaries as an engineer. I'm learning new stuff. So I don't think a person needs to buy books to learn. If you this statement could have been valid if you're a doctor or or a research scientist and you want to see at the forefront of your field. You're gonna learn things. You're gonna do things to get out your comfort zone so that you're at the forefront of your field, and that will require you
yeah,
to pick up new difficult things. But they're not books that like I'm gonna read like Sapien
mm,
or I think I read almost all Malcolm Gladwell's books. You would never catch me read something like that today, never, and I don't think you will ever catch me read something like that in the future because I could only predict that in the future I will have more ambitious technical projects to work on, and I will have less time for books like Sapiens, right? So
okay,
no, you're still learning. You're just learning things
yeah,
differently now from doing rather than like buying books on Amazon.
yeah. And your perspective is very much like technical engineering one.
Well, like I said, it could have been if you're a doctor. I think if you're a top doctor, you're learning in a
It's
medical field. So
technical.
yeah, right.
I we'll consider doctors technical for this conversation.
Sure, sure. Okay, but let's just say you're a therapist, right? Let's just say you're
They're
in
technical too.
whatever your field. Yeah, whatever field you're in, I think if you want to stay at the top of that field, you're gonna get out your comfort zone and learn new things. And I think that's
Yeah,
a much better way to
we agree.
learn, right, at your later
I
ages.
wasn't disagreeing with you, for the
Oh,
record.
okay, good, good, good.
Yeah, no, I was not disagreeing with you. It was just more I do weight like the unknown, and which is very interesting to like the later conversation we're gonna have here in terms of like how do you find something you don't know exists, and I think that's what's
Mm-hmm,
interesting about your app.
mm-hmm.
Additionally, it's like how do you get information and apply it in ways that like there's like stuff that's degrees of freedom away from what you're already learning. So like
Totally.
what you just referenced, and there's stuff that's like totally in the dark that you never even look at, and
Right.
so I like to have some type of ingest system for things I don't even like. Sometimes it's biography, sometimes it's just like a podcast of hearing people I've never heard about. Like Joe Rogan's kind of fun for that. Mine's fun for that. That's why I interview people that are so diverse because then I can get those perspectives in. And so like I do see like the value of like like an algebraic equation of like some wildcard information. So you can. I mean, you really would be surprised how often I pull something from biotechnology to technology, for instance, in terms of strategy, in terms of how to build things.
I
Um,
agree with you, but I don't think you need to consciously do that, right? Because I don't have some sort of I don't know why you're doing that. Like I don't have some sort of goal. Like okay, I'm gonna learn these wildcard things to get a heads up, or because I feel like whatever you're gonna be.
mm,
So be as lazy as you can, and you will meet the right information when it's time for it to come to you. You don't have to put in an effort. Like what I'm saying is you don't have to constantly try to expose yourself to new information. The right thing will come to you when it needs to come to you. So you could trust life in that sense and not
mm.
really even put in any effort. It'll come to you, don't you will become what you will become. I promise you that.
Yeah, I think, and I'm gonna steal someone else's quote, but generally, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And so,
Really?
yeah,
I don't
I
agree with
generally,
that.
I think
Defend
the
that.
hard, I, the more work I put in doing all these things and learning different diverse things and building different things, the more opportunity comes. When I know what I want to do and I'm working towards something, like you're to your point, like things kind of coalesce around it in kind of a weird way. But generally, I think if you're doing your best at something and you're doing it to the best of your knowledge and based on all these things, which I'm kind of being cyclical in that, but I generally think you can become luckier. Now there's degrees of luck in terms of like like Bill Gates, for instance, I think was always going to be a millionaire, but then he became a billionaire because of luck. Because like the people, the corporation didn't want to like an exclusive license to the code he was writing or something. I forget the exact story, but like that luck, like you can't really plan for that. But he was ready to seize that opportunity of luck, and then he just dominated the 90s.
Absolutely.
So like the harder he worked, he could seize more opportunities of luck that were presented to him. So like that's how I defend it. Like if you set yourself up, and this is a part of the fact that like I was sick for a very long time, and so I think, how can I best set myself up so if things go a certain way, I can seize them and not miss them due to energy levels. Like I used to have calls where I was at like 20% energy, and so like I did my preparation, so when I'd go into them, I already have a sense of where I want to go with them, and then also have the exploration of in the conversation as well. And so the harder I worked, the luckier I got in terms of having really productive conversations and really productive meetings. And in a world where most people just show up and like for business meetings, like you'd be surprised how many times, probably not, you wouldn't be surprised, but like most people don't show up to anything ready to go. They just want to like, and then they're trying to like hide it with small talk in terms of like, oh wow, how was your weekend? It's like sometimes there's a place for that. But like when you're there to work and build and do something, if you've prepared, you can kind of lead where you want things to go as well. Then you get even more luckier. If you get more luck with that hard work, because you if you put that work in there, you have a better intuition on the right moves and stuff like that. So that's how I would defend that argument of the harder your work. And hard is also smart, working smart. Not like if you put in like 20 hours of work doing stupid shit, I don't think that's gonna help you at all.
Right.
You got to kind of do the right things. But the right things, you get a better sense of what the right things are by doing more things.
I disagree with that slightly, and let me explain. I think there's a difference between identifying an opportunity and preparing for it, and we could argue even that's not hard work. And working hard, here's the funny part. Whenever I caught myself working hard, it was in the wrong direction. I was always in the wrong direction when I was working hard. I'm not kidding. I was always in the wrong direction when I was working hard. Whenever work was unpleasant and I'm working hard and I'm sweating, always in the wrong direction. When I was in the right direction, I was having a blast. I was having a blast. And let me be clear, I've done certain things that perhaps people would say require Herculean efforts, but I had a blast doing it. I had a fucking blast doing it. It didn't feel like hard work. Now, whenever I felt like things are hard, I was in the wrong direction. Always, So I don't think people get rich by working hard. I think people get rich by identifying opportunities and riding the wave. I think people get rich by investing long term and capitalizing after a certain period by positioning themselves correctly, basically. And I think people get rich by building tremendous skills that other people cannot really develop, and you can only build a skill to that level if you're really into it. And if you're really into it, you're going to have a tremendous amount of fun. So I don't know. I don't really see it. I don't think I work hard. No, I don't think I do. I had a lot of fun. I've made a lot of money, and I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Right.
It's actually a really interesting conversation we're having so far, because I think a lot of the times we're having semantic conversations, and that I think we're more or less on the same page, because I'm going to say right now, I agree with you that you should be doing the thing. Like, it should be fun for you. Like I set things up where I do work in terms of like things that I do not enjoy as work, to be as minimal as possible, so I can just be executing on things that I generally am excited, like I talked about learning, or anything that's just like, it's like if you looked at me, it looked like I'm doing cocaine or something.
Right. Facts.
So like for me, hard work isn't like, it's not a judgment statement on being like positive or negative. It's just like the quality of the work that like most people will colloquially understand. But I think we're generally on the same page in terms of like, if you're, the best way to do your best work is to find the things and find the avenue of looking at the things where you're having your most fun doing it. Like there are many times where I will be doing like this, like the difficult thing that is hard, and I'll try to brute force it, which is what you're saying you shouldn't do, and you went the wrong way. And I'll agree, it's usually been the wrong method. But if I sit back, even in writing, doing marketing, copy, anything, and I think, what would be the funniest way to describe this thing, then I'll slap that out there, because that usually is what people like.
Right.
But it still, I think, falls under the umbrella of what I would consider hard work. Even though I think as like a pithy quote, like the harder you work, the more luckier you get. But I generally think it's like probably more accurately, like the more things you do that you love and that you do with passion, generally you're probably going to have a happier life and more successful life. I mean, but that's like that's a little bit more lengthy to say.
I know a lot of people who work hard and are very unlucky. And I want to say something to your listeners too. If you find yourself working hard, sweating, you're probably in the wrong direction.
It's like working out. So this is where we're like it seems.
Did you hear that though? Did you hear that though? Pause on that.
Yes.
If you find yourself working hard, sweating, going through, you're probably in the wrong direction.
I hear you. I was gonna give an example supporting your statement.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
My bad.
I was just gonna say, like,
right.
It seemed at the beginning we were really far apart. I think we were disagreeing with the wording of what I was saying. But like in terms of like what my heart meant by what I was saying and what you mean by what you're saying, I think we're actually on the same page. Because there's a way of working out where like you can go balls to the walls on it and do as hard as you can, or you can do where you enjoy yourself and just do what you're supposed to be doing. And the second one will reinforce what you're doing more, and working as hard as you can in that arena like the results won't really be differentially better.
Right. So I have a blog, and one of my blog I talked about becoming an S-class human. Remember I told you before we went on air that there are different levels of humans.
You watch anime.
Right. There's S-class humans. And actually I got it from an anime called Yu Yu Hakusho. I
love that. I'm
rewatching
it. My wife's watching it for the first time.
Oh, I love Yu Yu Hakusho. Togoro's my favorite bad guy, by the way. But an S-class person, if I were to put that in the real world, because I've met S-class people, in my opinion, S-class people have very little resistance in their life. You don't really catch them working hard.
Okay.
They've learned to read life to a point when, because when you're working hard, that's kind of like life telling you you're in the wrong direction. And they've learned their interaction with life is so real time that they could see too much friction in this direction. Let me try another direction. And they learn to read the feedback life is giving them to a point where they find a path of least resistance way faster than most people. Most people will butt their head and work hard for years before they realize this is the wrong direction. As opposed to like an S-class person, he'll pick that up within a couple of days. And no, too much friction in this direction. Let's see where else there's less friction. Because, if you look at physics, right? Nature wants to move at the path of least resistance. It's the same with life. Energy wants to flow at the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is the path for you. Now, I'm not saying there's not times where you have to, get your hands dirty and do some dirty work. But you'll know because typically when it's time for us to go hard, life will give us a signal. Life will give us a signal. This is when you should go hard. And the rewards are very obvious. That the harder you go at that, the more you make, right? So there is a time to go hard, but that time is very clear because like the harder you go, the bigger the reward. So you strike with all your strength, but until you find that signal, until you see that clear opportunity, you should be moving at the path of least resistance. You should be doing what you love. You should be enjoying yourself. And it's clear that your listeners know that there's a difference between there's a time to work hard when you found that opportunity, you found the sweet spot, basically. You found the piggy bank and you want to smash it. So you hit that piggy bank as hard as you can. There's a time for that, but that's not most times. Most times especially if you're an entrepreneur, most times you're exploring, most times you're navigating, most times you're capturing information, you're systemizing methods. You should be having fun. And if you're not having fun, you're in the wrong direction. Do you see what I'm saying? A little bit clearer now?
I see your point. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. It's like with another example of what you're saying is when if you're running, you should not be tensing up if you want to go fast. If you tense up, you'll go slower, which is you think like if you piston it, you'll go harder. No, you actually you're slower than the person who's like singing like fucking Lady Gaga in their head or something, like enjoying themselves. Yeah.
And that's important too, because like if you move at this path of least resistance method, you'll have the reserve strength to go hard when it's time to go hard. Like I said, when it's time to go hard, life will give you a signal. You'll know the more you do this, the more you get paid, or the more you're trying to get when it's time to go hard, life will make it clear to you. You better strike. But if you don't have that reserve strength saved up because you were using it at plowing the field, thinking you're going to get lucky, you're not going to have the strength to strike on that opportunity when it shows up. So you got to know when to go hard and when not to go hard. And most of the times you're not going hard. Most of the times you're exploring, you're having fun, you're playing, you're learning.
I can imagine a scenario where many people are sitting in jobs or leaving college and they're in a position where they've never been exposed to the things that they love, or the things that they love are not things that they realize. Like, there are a few people that I've talked to this week who were having a problem, and I started just asking them to like describe it to me, and I just sat there really quietly, and they started talking about the problem, and they sheepishly said, well, there's this one aspect about this thing that's going on. I mean, very nondescript because I don't want, but they described this thing that they liked about this really complex issue that we're having. And I said, well, okay, let's take that and blow it up. Like, that thing that you're enjoying, even though it sounds silly to you, what is it? Let's dig into it. And literally we took that as the cornerstone of how they should moving forward, like doing like what's enjoyable. Right. And they messaged me today, like I talked to them before this call, and they were like nothing but like smiles and happiness, and they were like on the verge of like tears, like frustration, pissed off the other day. And so there's an element of like, I can imagine so many people who are stuck in a state of not knowing what they love, or even know how to be okay with identifying it, or whatever the word would be. So then how do you identify those opportunities when you're raised in an environment where no one encouraged you, when you're raised in an environment where everyone pushed you down, or you just didn't have the opportunity to see things that you'd be great at? Like, how do you find that for yourself? I guess, like, I can imagine scenarios for many people listening in, and I'm on like these, especially for millennials. There's a lot of millennials on Reddit, for instance, that just say they act like they're such dour, like their lives just are really, really unfulfilled, unactualized. So it's kind of advice for them, I guess, because they all describe what I just described for themselves.
Right. Well, opportunity is really a collective phenomenon, right? So as you know, I have a YouTube channel where I cover like great people like Henry Ford and Howard Hughes and stuff like that. And one thing you realize, everyone who's gotten rich, they gotten rich by riding a wave, right? So Howard Hughes, he was capitalizing off the aviation age. Aviation was very new at the time. It was unexplored territory, the skies. And Howard Hughes started as, he was breaking aviation records. He was a pilot. And then, he went into the aviation business, had his own, commercial airline. And, it was one of his ideas, actually, that, if you fly people at altitudes of 30,000 feet plus, that the plane ride will be a lot smoother, right? So a lot of commercial aviation that people enjoy today is tied to Howard Hughes. They don't know it. But the point is this, like Howard Hughes capitalized on an aviation wave. Same with Henry Ford. And in my episode, I talk about like prior to Henry Ford, transportation was one of the biggest pain point of people, especially if you lived in rural areas. That was a collective need at the time, right? Same with today with blockchain and stuff like that. So my point is this, like, opportunity is a collective phenomenon. There was like I think it was like the 80s or something, where there was like a huge wave of gyms. Like the boomers, they all wanted to get fit. So that's where you have like Planet Fitness, 24 hours. Like, people made billions off like, the collective need of baby boomers to be fit and sexy. So an opportunity is a wave. It's a collective desire that you can ride. And that's how people get rich. You don't get rich by yourself. You have to ride a wave, and you have to be smart enough to realize what is the current wave happening. Take, for an example, real estate. During the early 2000s, after the dot-com wave went bust, real estate became the next wave. And some people made fortunes off that wave, a lot of it unethically, unfortunately, through credit default swaps and stuff like that. But nevertheless, a lot of people made fortunes from the real estate wave. That wave is dead. That wave is finished. And there's people who are still stuck in a real estate game when the wave is already dried up. So I think a opportunity, a wave, has nothing to do with, you as a person, what you were meant to do. What you were meant to do. If you're a young millennial, and I'm a millennial too, but if you're a young Gen Z and you're sort of like, what is my purpose? I think the first thing you really have to do, the first and only thing, truthfully, is to explore what you did for fun as a child. Like everything that I do now, whether it's writing code or video production and stuff like that, I was dabbling in them since I was a kid, right? Since I was a kid, I was like dabbling in these things, and I was dabbling in them for fun. There was a website called amv.org where you could submit anime music videos, and I created a music video for an anime called Berserk, and I entered an anime music video competition. I never would have thought I was going to be a YouTuber, right? But like when you look at like what I was doing as a kid, what I do professionally today is directly related to what I was doing as a kid for fun. So I think if you're a millennial and you're kind of like a little bit lost as to what your path is, you should just explore what do you like to do for fun, and what are ways you could capture value from it, from the marketplace, right? And don't even focus on the whole marketplace thing. Try to see what you like to do for fun, observe what you do for fun already, and try to see if there's a match for that in a marketplace for it. And if there is, it create it, right? Like what I'm doing right now with CityXcape, being a scout, where you find these secret spots. I used to do that in San Francisco for fun, and I would take girls to like these cool locations. So in San Francisco, there's an area I used to take girls. It's a fountain that's bubbling colors. It's like it's a water fountain, and it's bubbling all these colors. And at night, it looks so freaking chic, And I would bring these girls, like I'll bring them one at a time, clearly, right? And I would tell them, throw a penny, close your eyes, throw a penny at the water fountain because it's so beautiful. And they would close their eyes, throw the penny. And as soon as they open their eyes, I'd kiss them, and I would tell them your wish has been granted. And they would just they would just be on the floor, right? And one night, I was
It's a powerful kiss.
Right. Right. One day, someone said to me, "Hey, why don't you make an app about that? Why don't you make an app about like, finding these cool secret spots?" And I told them, that's a stupid idea. That was my answer. That's a stupid idea, because I never really connected like, okay, this is just my hobby to, this could be like, a serious tech company, but it's becoming one, right? So I think just look at what you're doing for fun, and just look at what you're doing for fun. That's the key. Have fun. Remember, it's not hard work. Have fun here.
I think it's something I'll add there, and I agree. That's a good way of finding something. Ben Franklin, when he was a kid, he was a part of like a big family, and his dad was concerned that he was going to run off to sea, because Ben Franklin, when he was a kid, really loved sailing. Mm-hmm. And if you're running out to sea at that time was not a good thing. Like you can die pretty easily.
100%.
Living on So what he did to Ben Franklin was he took him to a bunch of different apprenticeships shops, like candle making, print shops, etc. And he just watched Ben Franklin just like go through the shop and just see how he'd respond to it. And so there was a couple that like Ben Franklin really got excited for, and he just apprenticed them in those roles. And so I think if you use that method, if you don't have anything that really stimulates you, that is fun, go out and find like in your area people doing a bunch of random different things, and go and just experience how they do them. Go experience how something is made. Like look at like I'm from a like the literal I don't want to dox myself, but like there are things around you where people are doing things, and if you go and meet them and they love it, that's kind of interesting. And right. if they don't love it, then just walk away, because you don't want to hear like a dispassionate person teach you about something that's kind of really boring and it's 100%. Not fun. I think that'd be a really good way if you are like if you had a childhood full of abuse or something, you didn't have the opportunity to have much fun. I think that'd be a great way to just one, get out. If you have social anxiety, like maybe find a way to do it in email or something. Like people are very open to having a coffee or shooting an email asking questions. I email people all the time asking questions about esoteric questions, and like pretty much everyone responds, and they're like world famous people, and they all they take, as long as you're very thoughtful and methodical about it, and you show that you're not wasting their time, people will help you with specific questions. If you have social anxiety, even if you have social anxiety and you can't go out, you can get that information to see if you love it. And I think that's another way that you can explore what you'd be great at. Right. But then moving into what you've built, one of the big questions, I think one of the things that we've been talking about somewhat is like how do you explore the unknown when you don't know what is there? And I think that's very interesting about the app and what you do. But then at the same time, how do how do you find something that you don't know is there? Like if you're going to Chicago or Boston or something, what do you do if your app didn't exist? If your app existing and there's people there, it makes it easier to find these hidden gems, which is
Right,
really
right.
cool. Um,
100%.
but how would you do just without those tools? Like how do you find stuff that you don't know exists? You just drive around and you look at a barn and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go look in that, or how do you
Well,
find things like that?
well, that's what scouting is. I mean, I'm wearing a say scout. That's what scouting is. And
Hmm.
a scout is someone who explores the streets. You know, a scout is someone who goes to a neighborhood he doesn't know or she doesn't know and explore every corner and talk to people. To be honest, the simple answer to your question is you talk to people. That's how you find the hidden gems. Like every hidden gem I've found, it was through me going to a neighborhood, talking to a couple of people, and eventually you meet a person who knows, who's in the know, who's connected. And that person, if you give them the right virtues, if you give them the right signal, if they're vibing with you, they'll start taking you to all sorts of really cool places. I mean, you wouldn't believe like the places people took me and they just met me. They just met me and they're taking me to underground places or hidden corners of the mountain. You know, there's a place in San Francisco. It's in a Presidio Park. No, Golden Gate Park. It's in Golden Gate Park. There's this particular route you take. And if I have you stand there, you will feel a resting tremor, like a resting earthquake.
Hmm.
That's how magical it is. You'll feel like the earth shaking under your feet. Always, you know? And that's like a secret spot, you know? But for you to know that, someone had to show you that. Like a person showed me that, and now I know. Um, so the quickest way to get to a secret spot is you go to a neighborhood you don't know that you're curious in, and you hang out there long enough to become a familiar face. And once you become a familiar face, there's gonna be someone there who's gonna talk to you, because typically every neighborhood has their scouts, and scouts are social people. They're kind of like the plug of that neighborhood. They might not know they're scouts, but they're the people that, like, if they see a new face, they're gonna talk to you because they always want to know who the fuck are you, right? Like, why are you in my neighborhood, you know? So like what will happen is a couple of these people who are like the neighborhood, the local icons, they're gonna come and talk to you. And if you vibe with them, they're gonna start plugging you in, and you're gonna start getting to see the more hidden stuff. Now there are limitations to this. What do I mean? Really, if you look at me, I'm black, right? So if I go to a Jewish neighborhood, you know, unfortunately, you know, certain Jews might not, you know what I mean? They might not show me certain things in their world because I'm not Jewish. This is not to say anything bad about Jewish people. There's nothing like that. It's just there are levels within the community. And unless you share a certain similar background, you're not gonna go deep. They're not gonna take you deep. You know, so if I go to the projects, for an example, like, you know, if I go to like a projects in Chicago or to the projects in Brooklyn or whatever, um, there are certain levels that I could go to that you can't go to. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll feel comfortable showing me way before they show it to you ever. But it works the same vice versa. There are certain neighborhoods or certain worlds I go to because of my background. I have limitations on like how much I can access in that world. So that's why like I need scouts from every background, because that's how like we could go, the app could show you deep elements in every world is by having scouts from every background. And actually one of the things I'm going to start focusing on my YouTube channel is I have this series called Secret People. I think I'm coming out with the last episode next week, and then after that I'm done. I'm going to go on a recruiting campaign where I'm looking scouts from all genders, all background, and you know, we're going to discover these hidden worlds that all cities have, and we're going to let the public enjoy them. Because ultimately what we're trying to do, or what we are doing, is we're giving people a way of plugging into the community they belong to. I mean, people that live in cities, they don't have community. They lack the community element because they're isolated in an apartment somewhere. And those places that they're looking to bond with people, they're not stores. They're, they're not restaurants. They're not, they're not commercial areas. But that's all they see. You walk outside, all you fucking see is stores and eateries and shit. Like, but that's not where community fucking happens. You gotta be in a known to know where that shit pops off. So scouts, what we do is we show you these hidden gems that skaters hang out at. That tech. So I work in tech. There's a place in San Francisco in an area called the Mission called Noisebridge. Noisebridge is basically a place for hackers to hang out, code, hack, solder. You could learn whatever you want. Another hacker will teach you, and it's completely free. All the resources, all this brain power, completely fucking free. But you wouldn't know Noisebridge exists unless you're in a tech community like that. You know what I'm saying? So, but imagine someone who wants to plug in tech. They're not a software engineer yet, or they're a junior engineer. They don't know about Noisebridge. They want to plug into the tech community. They need a scout like me to tell them, nah, you know what I mean? You need to go to Noisebridge. And unfortunately, I'm one person. I can't talk to a million people. But through an app, the people that needs to find Noisebridge will find Noisebridge. And there's tons of spots like Noisebridge for other communities, whether it's skaters, surfers, you name it, LGBT, you name it. Like, so every community has their spots. It's just you need spots to show you where they're at.
Mm-hmm. How do you build it where people are incentivized to add to it? And then how do people know, like, and then at the same time, how do you build in such a way where like the good gems shine brighter on your app versus ones that are like less interesting or less reputable, or in, like, how do you discern truth in those scenarios where like if anyone can like putting stuff on there? So like, how do you get people to be doing it? Then how do you qualify the data and the locations, and then metricize it to some extent so people know what they're getting as more people go there and stuff like that? Like, how do you ingest, and then how do you quality control?
Right. So let me answer your first question, which is how do you make sure people contribute in a system like that, right? So the app has a currency called street cred. Cityscape is a street app, clearly. Scouts are in the streets. So it's a street app. So the app has a currency called street cred. And each time you save a location, it costs you street cred. So each time, so if you go to discovery mode and you find this dope ass spot and you save it, like, I'm going to go check this shit out later, it costs you street cred. And the street cred goes to the scout that found it. Right. So what happens is at some point, you're going to run out of street cred. So how do you earn street cred? You earn street cred by posting spots and other people saving. You don't get a street cred for posting spot. You get street cred each time someone saves your spot. So if 1 million different people save your spot, you get 1 million street cred. So from just one spot, right? So, street cred, the street cred currency system is how we make sure that it's a give and take, Each
That's
time
smart.
you save a spot, it costs you street cred. Each time someone else save a spot you post, you gain street. Now, you talked about data integrity. How we do the data integrity part is through the stamp system, right? So when you save a spot, what's the next step? The next step is for you to go there and get a stamp. Now, the stamp that you get is really for you. It's for your memories. It's for your journey, because Cityscape has this thing called My Journey, where over time you could see all the spots you visited on a map. It's like we put a pin on each location that you visited, so you could see where you've been throughout the world in one glance. But each time you check in a location, the app also gives you a stamp. The app asks you to take a picture, and then it gives you a stamp at that location. So when you take a picture at that location that you're at and you get that stamp, and the app won't give you the stamp unless your location matched the coordinate of the spot, and you do that on the server side. So it's not happening on the client side, so you can't like fake that shit. So when we give you a stamp, okay, you are at this place, Graffiti Pier. That's a secret spot, for an example. You are at Graffiti Pier. You just took your picture. We're gonna give you a stamp. So Cityscape gives you a stamp. So the stamp does two things. One, it validates that whoever scout posted Graffiti Pier, it is really Graffiti Pier, because someone went there and got a stamp there and they didn't complain. They didn't say, "Oh, dude, I don't see shit here," right? So, it's real. Second, each time someone gets a stamp, that says a lot, because if the person took energy to actually go to that location has more value than other locations that didn't get a stamp, right? So each time someone saves a spot, that tells the algorithm that this spot is of better quality than other spot who are not getting as many saves, right? But each time a spot get a stamp, that's even a higher weighting average, right? That's more weighting points towards this spot, that this spot has more value than other spots. So basically, through the saving and stamping system, we're able to tell which spot is hot and which spot is not, basically. And we take care of the data integrity problem, because you can only get a stamp if you're there. And by the way, when a person get a stamp, they also earn street cred because they're validating data in my database, right? So when you post a spot and other people save it, you're telling the database, you're telling me that you're putting useful data on my database, so you get street cred for that. So street cred is a cryptocurrency that people mine. So when you post a secret spot and other people are saving it, you're telling the database that whatever spot you posted, people are liking it, they're finding it useful, they want to go see it. So you earn street cred for that. Now when you go and get a stamp somewhere and you validate that the spot is what it says it is, you're validating data in my database as well. So the system is able to mine more street cred and reward it to you for validating data. So street cred is not just an app currency where it keeps the cityscape economy running, the street economy running. It's also a cryptocurrency that is mined out of real work, because scouts have to go out and find these spots, and people have to go out and validate these spots by getting stamped. So people are finding data in a real world and putting it in my database, so they get street cred. And people are going out and getting stamped at these locations, and they're validating data in my database, and they're getting street cred too. So street cred is literally mined by people exploring the streets, whether it's finding new data in the streets or validating data in the streets.
So instead of having a computer do calculations, people just going about their day end up mining and creating the currency.
That's right.
That's really cool.
It's still work, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Right.
Versus having like a bunch of racks of computers just like burning a hole through your wall.
Right, absolutely.
That's really interesting.
I mean, that's why Cardano is so much better, right? Because it's a proof of stake system, and that's much more energy efficient than a proof of work system. But street cred, it's human labor that's backing the currency. It's human labor that creates the currency, that mines it. Street cred is mined by people by finding or validating data on the streets, because the streets has a lot of information that is not captured by any tech company. I mean, if you look at all the tech companies that exist, none of them give a shit about the streets. And that makes sense, because that's not necessarily the founder's background. As opposed to me, I grew up in Haiti and I lived in Brooklyn in a not so nice part in Flatbush. And I lived in kind of like the ghetto. And, the streets is something I grew up around, and I love the streets, I love the streets. A lot of excitement, a lot of danger. A lot of thrill, a lot of fun, a lot of money in the streets as well, but no technical entrepreneurs looking at the streets. And I think with my background and with my software engineering skills, it's those two combined sort of gave me the qualification to build this app for the streets, because like I said, I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up being a knucklehead, really. and yeah, I really think, and that actually brings a good point in a sense that, like, you asked if a Generation Z is not sure what to do with their life. That's another thing. Whatever experience you have in your life, that's your job qualification. Whatever is your life story, that's your real job qualification. I mean, I don't really care if you went to Stanford or Harvard or Yale. Your real life experience is your real professional experience is your life background, what you've lived, because that gives you a certain perspective that no one else have, which does allow you to create something that no one else can. So like I said, growing up in Haiti, and Haiti's a wretched place, by the way. And then, living in Brooklyn and Flatbush, which is also, a tough place, as you know. That's where Mike Tyson grew up, if you're not familiar. I grew up not too far from Avenue D, which is where he was at. And then, becoming a software engineer, all these things sort of just add up. And then, it allows me to build Cityscape as a street app. Now, let me be clear. I was never like a gang, like a gangster or something like, I was never like that deep into it. But that doesn't limit me in a sense that like whatever part of the street that I don't know, I could learn it from other people. There are other scouts that will help me with the missing components that I don't know about the streets, right? Because after, I think at like 18 or something, or 17, I joined the military, and so I got out the streets, right? So there's a lot of things about the street that I don't know. And I feel like that's why you have friends who know the streets more than you to teach you the elements that you sort of, your blind spots, basically, right? But yeah, that's basically my story in a nutshell.
So I love it. I think that's a incredibly genius. I have like a lot of ideas in terms of how you can market it, but no, every element of it's like really, really fascinating. I could see you like working with integrating with like dating apps like Raya, and you could just like your pitch could just be like unique experiences for unique people with unique people or something.
I haven't written that algorithm yet, but I will maybe next year I'll start working on that algorithm. But I will write an algorithm where Cityscape will observe what spots you save and check in. So let me show you something. So whatever, when you save a location, Cityscape know who else saved that location. So I don't know if you could see my screen here.
So it'll be like a meetup community within your app too. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so if I click this button, see who else saved this location, right? You could see.
I see 3 people. Yeah.
Right. So these are 3 people that also went. So Cityscape does 2 things. It knows everyone who saved the location to go see it, right? It also knows where people have checked in. We could start predicting now. We could say, hey, Julie over there also want to go to that same spot you saved. And she also checked in at similar spot that you checked in. Do you want to meet Julie? And you and Julie already have something to talk about because you both saved Graffiti Pier. You both want to go to Graffiti Pier, so you already have something to talk about. Or you've both been to some XYZ place, and Cityscape will tell you those places that you both have in common, right? So Cityscape will make the suggestion. So if anyone says no, no one feels rejected. I think that's important because a lot of the time people are on dating app and they send these likes and they get nothing back. At some point, it feels terrible. But also, like, not only Cityscape prevents the rejection part because it's Cityscape playing a matchmaker. Like, you guys both save these locations. Do you guys want to meet up and explore it together? But if anyone says no, no one feels rejected because no one asked anyone. It was Cityscape that was doing the matchmaker. But more importantly, I think when people do decide to say, okay, yes, we want to connect. Okay, what do you talk about now? I think there is this thing where like the conversation just dies in online dating because there's nothing to talk about really, as opposed to like Cityscape will say, well, you guys both want to go to Graffiti Pier. You have 2 days to go there. You guys have 5 days to go there, or we could even let them choose. Do you guys want to go to Graffiti Pier in the next 2 days, 5 days, or 7 days? And they could talk and say, okay, we'll do the next 5 days, right? So like, I think Cityscape could suggest things that gets the conversation going and makes them cooperate. Because one thing I've learned is like people learn each other much better when they're forced to work together. So yeah. Cityscape, because it knows where you want to go, because you tell Cityscape, I'm saving this to go there, and it knows where Julie wants to go, it could force events upon you that makes you have to cooperate. And as you guys cooperate, you'll get to know each other. And since it's now, you guys are now going to Graffiti Pier together, you get a date, even though it's not really, it's exploration, but it's a date, and you get to see her in many other dimensions other than like the traditional, you're going to sit across me and eat, and it's going to be like an interview for a husband, right? So I think there's a lot of ways we could innovate in a dating realm, but I'm really busy with other things right now, especially with the app architecture and the community building. So I haven't written any of this algorithm yet. So I'm talking about things I haven't coded yet, but I will. and I'm gonna do it very, very elegantly. I promise you that.
I was thinking more so doing it like all yourself, that's interesting. I was thinking more like you could integrate into those apps where they make a connection, and a lot of them, I haven't been on them in a while, but I like have friends who are on them, and there's like subreddits I like to read because like people share horror stories.
Right,
But
right.
apparently, when people connect with people, there are some that will literally try to suggest areas around there. So I could see people who have filled out their profile, matching with someone, and then taking that data and then matching it to some place nearby, and then they could be a part of your street cred contracts and have unique experiences. So you can translate that directly into real world integration
But
with what you're
why
doing.
would I need that data from another app when I already have it? That's my question to you. I already
Uh,
know where you want to go and where Julie wants to go. No.
you don't a larger base of people that are already on your platform. So the people that are on the dating app, they represent
Mm-hmm.
like there's a lot. They're basically bringing you data, and then you're making use of the data usefully, and then you're getting that
Mm-hmm.
data and then making their data more useful. So it's a circle that benefits the app and benefits you. They have more people that
Right.
that most likely are not on your app. So it brings you business and it brings them business because they're making better, unique experiences that aren't just like the regular mill of things, and is tailored to their users as well. So I'd see that working that way.
Yeah,
I don't have a
I
dating
see
app, but I
that.
imagine
Right.
that being very valuable.
Well, I've never looked at the APIs of like say Tinder or I have Instagram plugged in to Cityscape, so I have looked at their APIs and see what data they provided, but I haven't looked at any dating app and see what information they give and what information they don't give. So a lot of the times I can't really tell what I could build unless I know what data are they giving me in the first place, right? Then I could perhaps think about, okay, well, this is an algorithm I could create to make that data useful, to employ that data usefully. So I haven't looked at those APIs, but I could totally see what you're saying is something
Yeah.
in the future, 100% for sure.
Yeah. And I think in particular, ones that match both having influencers on it and people that try to like, I mean, literally the whole job is making content that's unique. So that's
Right,
Raya. Like it's only for like celebrity nerdy people and YouTubers,
right,
uh, like Instagram people. I don't know the terms for these, like the zeitgeist on these things, but I think that one in particular would marry very well with what you're doing because all of
right,
them want clout or street cred. So I mean, it really
right.
fits in with the branding. And then
Well, a
they,
scout on the app has other ways of getting cloud too. It's not just street cred. We have this thing called street following, where you could
mm,
street follow someone, and if someone is street following you, any spot you post, they immediately get a push notification. Mind you, there's already people who that's their job. Like if you think about it, that's a promoter. A promoter, he has like a list of emails or a list of numbers that he chains text events that's happening, right? As opposed to a promoter, if they come on Cityscape, people could just street follow him or her, and they don't need to chain text or chain email. Whatever venue they post, whether it's a club or whatever, an after party, all of their street followers will see what they post, right? So I want to create a new type of influencer, is what I'm trying to say, because scouts, I think, are going to be influencers in their own domain. They're going to be street influencers. I don't know if what do you think?
I think that's interesting. I could see scouts being uh very valuable and like having their own influence just on discovering things.
Right.
Um I worry about safety, you know, like if like maybe if there's a time delay, so it's like you don't drop a pin and then everyone starts like attacking them, because that is an element. Like people when they get to a certain level, people just start, you know, doxing them and like swatting them and stuff. So if there was like a time delay element, so like they can drop a pin, not, you know, drop an area, and then other people can come in and get stamped. I think that'd be really interesting. Um, Additionally, I had a question on could you set up like like a stamp that starts. I don't know why I'm calling stamps, but what was the term they use for like setting up in a, like an area,
A spot.
a spot? All right.
Yeah, or location.
I
Yeah.
like calling them stamps because like you get a stamp, like stamp locations.
Stamp is what you get when you go there and actually check in.
Yeah.
You know,
There's well,
the stamp is what you. It's kind of like a passport stamp. You go to
yeah,
that spot,
yeah. I
you get
saw
your
it. Yeah, it
stamp.
looked
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
cool.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you
Okay. Well,
post a spot, that's just a spot. You know.
okay, a spot. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you can could you place a spot that has sub spots that you discover after it, so you could make like a scavenger hunt or a specific experience.
100%.
Oh, that'd be really cool.
100%. Like we have
And you don't
this.
know before you go. It'd be like completely like you just see the first one, and then you go there, and then like doing that condition, getting the stamp moves you to the second one. Then you
Right.
just
It's
extra.
actually a little bit more intricate than that, in the sense that like whatever spot you post, you could have it generate a barcode. That barcode you could print and put on a wall somewhere. And
Mm,
that's the only way they could check in. They have to scan that barcode to check in. And then
that's
when
cool.
they scan that barcode to check in, whatever next clue you leave for them, they get. But you could imagine like the first 10 people to scan that barcode, like the first person get 10 street cred, the second person get 9 street cred, the third person to scan that bucket, and then it goes back to all the way down to 1, and then everyone after that always gets 1. So there's like this first mover advantage, like the
Yeah.
first 10 people to get that, to scan that barcode, get more street cred than the rest of the people. But scanning that barcode opens doors to whatever the scout wants to show them after that as well. So yeah, it can be a scavenger hunt. That's actually a feature I was working on earlier this year, but I got really busy with other things that I felt had priority. But I know I finished the barcode feature already, so the barcodes is available. So each spot a user create, they could have that spot generate a barcode for them, for people to check in. I just need to finish that up with like the next clue. I haven't coded that yet, but
Yeah.
it's I'm just one guy, so it's a lot of work for one person.
It makes sense. It makes it like you already have, 1 degree of experience, but then if you can have multi-degree
Mm-hmm.
experience, you're like that's addictive. That's very
Mm-hmm.
exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's already exciting in and of itself in discovering something new, especially for
Mm-hmm.
someone who likes learning something. And anyone who's listening to this is gonna like that as well.
Right, right.
So we're definitely gonna have the links in the show notes, and I'm gonna say them at the end in the outro, so
Right.
everybody can check it out. Um, I was thinking if you are really well known and you have street cred as a scout, can you use that extra street cred you have to set what people get when they go to your thing? So you could like incentivize people to go to your spots even more.
Right, right. So like I said, if you put a barcode, you could set it where like the first person who scanned a barcode get 100
Okay.
street cred,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
the next person get 99 street cred, right? You could set that, of course, but you need a certain scout level to have privileges like that. So there's like scout ranks that's already in the app already, believe it or not. And as you find more spots, and as more people check in your spot, so the success of a scout is really dictated by how successful his spots are, meaning how many people are saving the stuff he's posting, how many people are checking in the stuff he's posting or she's posting. So your that's street influence, right? Because whatever you post, people go there. They could move people on the streets. That's what scouts are. They have street influence. They move people. So, you know, a scout with a lot of street influence, meaning a lot of street cred, he's gonna have privileges to do exactly what you're talking about, where he could give way more street cred for a user to check in than a scout who's just starting out, and they won't even no, they won't have that kind of privilege.
Yeah. You create a marketplace, and then all you have to do is just weigh it against the sections like new and noteworthy, like what
Right,
iTunes or other podcasts do, so that it's not just like uh, the big box scouts that are keeping the incumbents from coming in and discovering new things. So it's
right.
you get the best of like people who are super users and people who are coming in with even new content, so that everyone has like I imagine you have some ability to have that as well to like
Right.
have the best of both worlds.
Right, right. I mean, it's still in the making, so to say, like especially the quality assurance aspect. I think a big part of that is training scouts on how to put quality posts, because I've seen a lot of shitty posts put on the
Yeah,
app
like a
where,
template would be great.
right, right. It's not just because they have a form they fill out to create a spot, right? It's just there's certain things that they take for granted in terms of like what kind of picture they should use. Make sure the picture is high resolution. What perspective are you giving the viewer? What kind of when you write the description of the spot, are you giving the user context? Because as a scout, you're not just telling the person about a spot. You got to give them the context. There's a lot of secret spot if I take you to, it'll just look like a hole in the wall to you. It's when I tell you the context of the location, that you'll be able to understand why it's special, you know. And you as a scout, you don't have time to talk to a million people and give them the context, so you have to make sure you write a description that gives the person who's seeing the spot a context, a good context of the locations, so that way their experience is even richer when they get there. A location isn't special to us until we understand its story, you know? And I feel like a lot of the scouts on my platform, they don't get that deeper element, because like Cityscape is not just about like connecting people on the streets, right? Because, you know, that's our goal. We want you to find your community. We want you to meet new people. We want you to find new spots. But that's one of our goals. Our other goal is to give you context, not just connection. When people are walking the streets, man, they don't realize that the city is a hive, and you know, you need a special lens to be able to decipher that hive, you know, because like, so I used to live in San Francisco. There's all sorts of neighborhoods in San Francisco, and each of them are their own world, their own community, their own like secrets, their own history, you know. And unless you know that, that neighborhood won't mean much to you, right? So I feel like a big part of scouts is to give people context, because like, unless you understand the story and the history of the city, it's just a pile of concrete. It's nothing special to you. You know what I mean? And you need someone to come tell you. For example, Minneapolis, it was a huge grain hub. You know, a lot of grain was. I think they even had like a grain exchange or something like that here. You know, and that's why like they even had a part of Minneapolis called Mill City, which you could go and get the history of like what Mill City was about and stuff like that, right? So once you start learning that about Minneapolis, you'll always think of like, oh, grains, Mill City, you know, like, you know, the grain exchange, right? So people need that context to be able to tie that city to something meaningful. And there's usually not a scout to give them that. So it's just a bunch of concretes that they're just walking around aimlessly.
That makes sense. And it is, I can see why it's very important. I can imagine a community resource hub, like some that's built by you guys, some built by people in the community, and you can even have it down to what type of phone are you using to make your posts. And then you could literally have it walk through like, this is the type of camera angle you want, these are the type of things that you want to do to capture just like a good series of images, and then this is like roughly how you describe it to give that context, you know, like make it easier for them to become power users, kind of what YouTube does already, where any like already established medium does. They have like these tutorials and guides that really make it almost kind of like idiot proof to, like, if you have the interest to do a good job, it makes it really easy for you to do a good job.
Right. That's the next thing I'm going to work on. Can I give you another example of a context thing? Because I feel like, because I'm new to Minneapolis, right? So I don't really know the city like that, but I'm from New York, as you know, and I lived in San Francisco for a long time too. So I know those two cities really well. So I'll use New York. You've ever heard of Wall Street?
Yes. With the
why is it called? Yeah. Why is it called Wall Street?
Because there was a wall that was built on it during the pre-Revolutionary War or during the Revolutionary War to fight off the British.
No.
There's a wall there. I think there's a wall.
No, you're right. There was a wall there. You're actually much closer than most people.
There's a wall.
Mm-hmm. The wall was created.
The one that was for the Native Americans?
Yes, it was to protect the Dutch from the Lenape tribes, and actually black slaves built that wall. As a matter of fact, I mentioned a black slave thing for a particular reason. It's not because I'm black and I'm trying to throw dirt at New York City. Not at all. That they had black slave built Wall Street to separate the Dutch from the Lenapes, and the blacks live near that wall because they wanted to also use the blacks as a buffer against the Lenapes, right? So Wall Street was a very important wall. Like there was really a wall there. And I think once you understand that story, you'll never look at Wall Street again. The next time you go to the New York Stock Exchange, without you knowing that story, you'll go to the New York Stock Exchange, you'll see those nice little marble building and those pillars, and that's it. You'll take a few pictures and leave. Now you know that story. You go back to Wall Street, I promise you won't have the same fucking experience. You will look at Wall Street, you will look for details that are entirely different at Wall Street. You will try to find where was that wall? And there are markers on Wall Street that tells you where that wall was erected, actually. Can you find it? Can you be a good scout and find it, listener? But you get what I'm saying, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
big part of being a scout is giving people that context so that they bond with the city, they bond with the neighborhood. And, community is not just like I know a bunch of fucking people, right? Community is I know the history here. I know how this place evolved. I know where this place is going. A big part of community is stories. What is the history, right? And I feel like a lot of the scouts that I have now, they don't quite understand that. And it's my fault clearly for working on secret people and not getting on these type of content you talk about. But I plan on changing that very soon.
Yeah, I would weaponize your community. Have the
Right.
power users make the guide, and then find a way to incentivize them for it. Similarly to the post and people stamping them. If they make a good guide and people stamp that, they can get the same type of street cred, and then you don't have to do
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Right.
there's a It reminded me, and it made me think of this experience that you could have, where there was a guy who was interviewed who was the last slave. He was on the last slave ship to come to America, and he was
Mm-hmm.
interviewed, and it was preserved, and so you can literally hear him describe what it was like when he was hiding in the, because it was illegal then too when he was coming over in the slave
Right.
ship,
Right.
but
Right.
they were still doing it. So when they came over, they landed the ship and they had to hide in a swamp and they burnt the boat. And so you could
Holy
have that
shit.
area, that location, and you could have his description there as well, given the context in his own words. And so and then you could just follow him from, that slave ship to eventually emancipation. And I think that'd be really cool to like
That's
have the series
amazing.
of, yeah. And then you can imagine the wall. I don't know if people interviewed them or if they had their own journals, but you could have the description of this context, but then you could go through like one person's life on that wall. And I think that'd be really
Right. Right.
exciting
Right.
too. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
picture that like very clearly. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, the app is gonna have a feature called a trail, which is basically a sequence of spots that are related. I haven't built that yet, but I think that's what you're kind of hinting at, a trail, whether it's someone's life or, as a matter of fact, one person had called me from Stanford and they were like, "Hey, James, can you have one of your scouts trace me every location Martin Luther King had eaten when he was in Berkeley?"
That'd be really
And
cool.
yeah, and he was like, "I'll pay him $2,000 for it." And that actually, like, I was
Mm,
like, wow, you're willing to pay a scout to do that? Another thing that had happened when I
bids.
was in
That's
New
cool.
York, right? When I was in New York, this guy,
Sponsor.
he was a hotel developer, and he said, "Hey, James, you have like scouts, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can you put like a message out to your scouts that if they know any land and any like good area, and if we survey it and we buy it, we'll give them a cut because they're looking to build hotels." So they're like, if a scout sees an area that could be a great potential for a hotel, because your scouts are in the city, they're moving about, they know the city, we'll give them a cut if we do buy the land and develop a hotel on it, right? So that's another thing that I haven't explored too much. That there is a market, like a bounty market, where
Yeah.
someone could put a job for a scout, like find me this, and if the scout finds it, the bounty is released and they get paid. But I haven't explored that too long. But those were the two jobs where two actual people came up to me and offered money for scouts to do work.
Yeah, that'd be really exciting to have some type of like competition marketplace like that where people can
Mm-hmm.
request experiences. And if it's like, oh, we request this, and then you could have like a, hey, did you check out these similar experiences? So while they're waiting
Mm-hmm.
for that, they already have other things that they're looking for. And there could be a
Right.
way to like standardize the submission so that people can like look at all, because I imagine they get inundated with opportunity then. There's a way
Mm-hmm.
to like standardize like, hey, here are like the criterion and stuff, and then they can look at all of it and then go. That'd be really cool. And then every year you could have competitions with your scouts and do the Shopify thing, where they went from like a very small, like $10 million business to doing like a yearly Shopify competition where like the winners won certain things, and you could have like a straight con or something. And
Well,
then
that's too commercial for me. I'm not really. That sounds a little too commercial, no?
I don't know if it gets people excited and it rewards them for their behavior. You don't have to have a conference, but you could have like some reward for them doing it, if it's monetary, street cred, or otherwise.
My question to you, right, is like, I feel like a lot of the times companies do things that are very artificial for the sake of money. And I don't ever want to be one of these companies, right? My question to you then is like, how do you separate, when a company is doing genuine organic activities with their, participants, and when they're doing transactional things like competition, da 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 da. How do you know when it's real organic community? Because the Scout, that's a community too, and I'm big on community. I don't want to do a little competition to use them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
I
has to be
think
from the heart. So how do you differ? That's my question to you.
I would think that it depends if it matches the context of the brand. I think Shopify is a good example of this because Shopify is all about helping businesses build their thing. Like that's their thing that they love. And so when they build a competition to like help, like one, it's like providing motivation for people to get out there, like a catalyst to do it. Like it feels more like an authentic thing that people want to do versus like, I think Mountain Dew has competitions like, oh, can you get this like this thing or a McDonald's, like the little Monopoly thing that feels a
Right,
little
right.
bit more like parasitic in terms of like I don't see how it fits with maybe like Monopoly with McDonald's because like you get little toys, but like Mountain Dew and if people like this and it makes sense. Like some talk to me about it, I just don't see the value of it. I don't think the Mountain Dew competitions or the Mountain Dew like go find like the golden ticket thing. I don't think those are brand appropriate. Like I don't think they match the vibe of what they're doing. So if it feels, I think if it matches the brand or it matches the feel of what the business is about, I think then it makes sense. Like Shopify, I think is a good example of that because I think they did it because it matches what they care about. And so
Right.
if you do it and it matches what you care about, I think that would make sense. At the same time, if you try it out and then your community says, "Oh, that's really like," they kind of like pull back, kind of like tasting fish that's bad, then
That's
it,
true.
it doesn't work out and that's fine. Especially if
That's
you're in the
true.
early stages, you're a small team, like people expect you to try different things.
That's
But
true.
I think I like as a summary, I think if it feels like it's just one step removed, and it could like Intuit, like this Apple concept that like one represents the whole. If
Mm.
you looked at the competition, would you feel the same as everything else you're doing? Would it have the same reward and an ethos that you're trying to impart in every other element of the system? If yes, then I think they would make sense.
Right. You got a good point. One thing I have to say, right? I think a lot of the people who become scouts, they're edgy people,
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of have to be if you're gonna be in the streets meeting people like that, right? Shit could get dangerous real quick, as you know. So they're edgy people, they're adventurers, they're and I'm not sure what would work for an audience like that, is what I'm saying. I'm
Mm.
still getting to know them, so to say, but yeah.
You could figure that out through like basically like pitch them three different ideas. Like there's a marketplace where people can add bids. There's like
Mhm.
your different things. Then get a sense of how they respond to it and
Right.
ask them for feedback. I mean, most of the time, I always just a fan of just like asking, and like there's a specific way you can ask them for feedback. Like if
Right.
this existed and it went away, would you be upset about it? Would it bother you? Would it change your life or whatever? There's a way to
Right.
like structure the questions where you can actually like it's like, do you like it? Yeah, people
Right.
like free features. You don't know if it's worth anything,
Right.
but there's a way to phrase the questions where you can see like are these things that people are is it going to make them want to do more of it? It's going to reinforce the values that you want. Um, and
Can I
there's
show
some
you
guides
something
on that.
else real quick? Can I show you something
Yes.
else? Take
Yeah.
a look at this. So this is the feed in a Cityscape app. This is the feed that shows you what people are doing. And if I click, so this person got a stamp, right? And if I click on her stamp, this
Oh,
is
share a
like,
drink.
right, this is the last place she checked in. But, you know, as people get stamps on an app, it pops up on a feed that this person checked in here, that person checked in there. And that's for every city, right? So whether you realize it or not, what Cityscape is kind of doing, and that's really the ultimate goal. Cityscape is showing you the city in real time, right? Because like if all of a sudden you look at the feed and there's a bunch of people checking in at this location, you know where the crowd is. So we had a fair in Minnesota, for an example, and if I looked at the feed and I see a bunch of people check and they're all checking in at the fair. I'm not saying I'm not seeing people checking other places, but I'm seeing the majority of check-ins I'm seeing coming in the feed are at the fair. So I know, like, holy shit, like, that's where everyone is at, right? So that's ultimately the goal of the app is to show people the city in real time,
Hmm.
right? So that, and that's why it's called Cityscape. Cityscape stands for a view of the city. um the goal is to show you what's going on in the city in real time so that you don't need to have a plan. You could just throw yourself at the hive whenever you feel lonely or bored or you want excitement. You could just go plug in the hive when you want to interact with it. And when you don't want to interact with it, go back to your apartment. And I think that's the ultimate luxury of cities. Cities gives you the luxury of being anonymous. If you live in a small town, everyone knows who the hell you are. And reputation travels. So whatever you do, everyone knows. City gives you this ability of being anonymous. You could go out and punch someone in the face, scream your guts out, walk back 2 hours later, no one knows you did that. Right? So this anonymity is incredible, but it could also lead to disastrous loneliness. But with a tool like Cityscape, where you could see what's happening in a city, where people are, where checking ins. And remember, when I just showed you that checked in and you saw that stamp, you saw the location she was in. So you get to see not only where people are at, you get to see what that place looks like right now. Right? You ever heard someone say, "Oh, come to this joint. It's really cool. It's really cool." But like, what does it look like? Why is it really cool? With Cityscape, you could just look at the stamps and you could see different pictures of that location and what people are doing there, right? So, but people don't know when they're checking in to get their stamp, they're doing it to get their stamp. They're not aware that they're giving other people who's not at that location a glimpse of what's going on in the city. They don't need to. They just need to do dumb. And I think that's one of the best things of Cityscape is that it uses data so effectively that like a person don't even have to be aware that they're contributing to this real-time feed, this real-time picture of the city. They just have to be selfish and do their things, and Cityscape will take care of the rest. But what is your thoughts on this?
I think it's very powerful. I think I have some concerns in terms of like if there was just an option to like delay it like a day or two, or like have some like optionality so that like like maybe some vulnerable young ladies or whomever doesn't
remember these are public places, right? Don't forget that.
Yeah. But I think like the delay aspect I think would make it a little safer. Like I know they're public places and stuff, but I think like that if you had, it's like what Apple does, like, hey, you're gonna be tracked, and then you just click A, and then you're fine with it. They just like make the option. I think
that's a great that's a great idea, by the way. I should probably implement something like that where I could give the user the option to delay if they that's a great idea.
I think it would make women more, I imagine it would make vulnerable populations more likely to go out there and check it out, especially if they know it's going to be broadcast live. Women, apparently many women suffer from stalkers and stuff.
Right.
So it's like they would just use it as another example of like finding them. But it's a very powerful tool. I think it just has like that one limitation, but it's incredibly powerful. But I think if you do the Apple thing where it's like you just put up front like, hey, this is going to be live. But at the same time, if you want to like delay it like 2 weeks until you're out of the city and back home, you can do that too. So then you still get the hive. It's a bit delayed, but you still get like, I imagine there's some way to tell like there's a lot of people there based on like the history of the stamps.
That's actually what I was going to tell you. I'm suspecting that in the future, you won't visibly see these people stamp. You can, those that lets you, those that says, okay, I'm cool with that. But I think in the future, you will just see a map with heat. You will see a heat map.
Oh yeah, then that's all upside.
Right. Because if I abstract it that way, people don't have to worry about being. I think that's a great point you just made, especially for a woman. I mean, as men, we don't really think about that too much, right? Because you attack me, it's on you. Whatever happens, right? One of us is gonna die. But like women, they don't think like that. So no, great point. I really think you nailed that one.
I also think that there are many different ways that you could do it. So that I think the image aspect will activate the mirror neuron of like, oh, I could see myself doing that, and then it makes it easier for them to go out. So I wouldn't want you to lose that, where you could maybe even make it so that it anonymizes the image, where like it takes the person out of it if they don't want to be a part of it, but you can still have the like generally the idea of the activity. So there's like degrees of privacy you could add to it to make people feel safer, more comfortable with it, but you could still have elements of the image preserved. So outside of just a heat map, you can also get like the texture and the context of like the images as well. I think there's basically my point is like I think there's ways to still preserve that really exciting element of that would activate mirror neurons of like feeling the area.
Right. I think user optionality is the best one, right? The users that don't mind their stat being shared real time, they'll let it. The users that do mind, they'll choose the delay option.
Yeah, the heat map just takes care of both.
Right. The heat map takes care of both, but the goal is if you tap that heat map, you could see stamps too, right? So the heat map
Mm.
is rather interactive. It's not a static thing. The heat map just gives you a clue of what are the hot areas in the city. But you're gonna pick an area that you're most likely, probably the one closest to you, the closest heat area to you, and say, okay, what's going on there? So stamps will have to pop up sooner or later. And I think the user optionality of like, okay, I don't mind. Like some people, I know they don't care. So, whatever, but some people do care, like you said. And probably a lot of them are women who they don't want Johnny to show up. Right. They don't want Johnny to show up out of nowhere. So no, great point. Great point.
Or it could or to know if they're there, they could just have like a random generated name. It's like Sarah. Or you just have like a whole list of names. It just populates their name, and
Right.
then you could like superimpose like a different image there or something, like, or like just blur it out.
Right.
So you can
Right.
make
Right.
it real. You can make it like hyper sensitive to those people as well, which I don't know to the extent it would be difficult. But I think you'd find like more women doing it if even if it was just delay. I think it would be more inclusive in that way. But if there's other ways to anonymize it in terms of name and other things like that, I think you wouldn't have any downside in that regard.
Right.
Especially because
Right.
like people like, I mean, like you're not really like what I'm talking about is like really not like the average person. Like
Mhm.
the like you're what I'm thinking about is like that person who's like really obsessively like hunting someone down, and that like
Right. Right.
unfortunately
Right.
like the internet makes it those people exist. But then
I think there are other threats that come with it, that come with a tool like that. I mean, if I give the world a heat map of where people are, it's a great tool for terrorists, right? To come blow shit up. So I do think there is a double-edged sword, like all
yeah,
technologies, where there are certain precautions now that have to be considered given um uh giving the power that we're putting in people's hands. um and of course it's an active fight. It's a fight that never goes away. I'm not saying that a terrorist can't arbitrarily wake up and go blow an area up. They could do that at any point, with or without Cityscape. But I think
yeah.
with Cityscape they could do it a little bit more intelligently, and measures will have to be taken in regards to that, because safety is a big thing.
I think it would make it depending on how your app's set up in terms of like I think everyone has to have an account to have the app. Like we've gone
Mhm.
way over our time.
Oh, have we?
It's
It
all
flew
good. Yeah,
by.
yeah. Like we're having a really great time. So I was like, oh,
maybe
I'll just
maybe
wait
maybe
until he
we should
yells
do
at
a
me.
part two. Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
we should ask your audience, should we do a part two? Maybe we should do a part two. I don't know.
yeah. Um, I was just gonna say that if everyone has an account, I think there'd be a way to track back if someone used your app to do something like
That's
that.
that's absolutely true. As a
So
matter of
I
fact,
think it'd be a huge disincentive to do such a thing.
yeah, damn, you nailed it again. So the app has something called a street pass, which let me see if I could load it up here. Um, can you see me?
I do see you.
So that's actually one of the first things you have to create on the app, is this tool called a street pass.
Mm,
And this street pass, by the way, it's actually something I learned from the streets, where in my neighborhood, if you live, well, in Brooklyn, if you live in one part of the ghetto, you
yeah,
can't go to another part of the ghetto without a street pass. People are going to come to you and say, do you have a pass? And if you don't
that's
have a
interesting.
pass, you're going to get fucked up, right? So what do they mean by do you have a pass, right? What they really mean is, do you know someone here? What are you
Mm,
doing there? Do you know someone there? So that's where I learned the term street pass from. And that street pass that I just showed you, it's a real ID card. And that's actually another reason why I want to put a part of Cityscape on a blockchain, is that blockchain, whether people realize it or not, blockchain does a huge thing that wasn't done before. I mean, when the internet, you have a bunch of app on the internet, and they all require usernames and passwords, right? So you have a username, password for this, username, password for that. The reason why you have all these username and passwords throughout all these different apps is because you have no identity on the internet. Blockchain solves that in a sense, where through blockchain you can have a permanent digital identity. So this idea of password is no longer necessary, because every activity you do online is tied to your unique identity on a blockchain. So one of the things I would like is that street pass, which is a street ID card, the Cityscape street pass, is going to be tied to your digital identity on a blockchain. So whatever you do on a street is tied to you, right? So, and the street pass can be revoked. So imagine like you meet Julie because Cityscape made a suggestion, and you Julie accepted, you accepted, and you guys go to graffiti pier together. But while at graffiti pier, you go crazy and you snap on Julie. Julie reports it to Cityscape. What is Cityscape going to do? Well, we're going to suspend your street pass or revoke it, depending on the trespass, right? So the street pass is a real ID card. It's a real street ID card, and it exists even before Cityscape was there. Like I said, it's not just Brooklyn, where if you go to a different neighborhood, they'll ask you about a street pass. I think every hood in the United States have a street pass system. I'm just digitalizing that phenomenon. I'm just replicating that phenomenon in the digital world. And I think that's a serious key to the safety element that we've sort of covered, is tying that street pass to as much as real world identity as possible, so that if there are a bad actor, if you do decide to be a bad actor, your street pass could be suspended, revoked, or worse, you could be arrested. The CIA or FBI can be at your door and you're gone.
Mm-hmm. And I think the really interesting thing about security in general is you don't have to have the best security. You just have to have better security than your neighbors. And so why would
Right.
someone break into your house, use your thing for such an evil acts, if they can do it other ways much more simply and much more anonymously? So
Right.
I generally think with these principles in place, I think you'd have to be like really silly to do it. And then if they did, then it just, I mean, they're going to get caught really, really fast.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then like the
Exactly.
stories of getting caught, like, I don't know. I don't think, I think it'll be suffer enforcement in terms of like keeping people off of it, especially if, your neighbors are just much easier to
Right.
find people and
Right.
whatnot. Um,
But let's be honest here. The streets, there's potential danger. That's part of
yeah.
the streets. There's potential danger. I mean, if you look at the cityscape colors, is orange and red, and dark. These colors are not arbitrary, right? They're not arbitrary. Look at the streets. The pavement. They're not white. Orange is a color that implies excitement, but also danger. So I want to be clear. There are potential dangers there. And whether you're a scout or a regular cityscape user, especially if you're going to a secret spot that's unverified,
Mm-hmm.
meaning no one got a stamp there yet and validated that it is what it said. Any rapist could post a secret spot and you come there, that's who's waiting for you, right? So the Cityscape app has an element of danger from the go, and I want people to be clear about that. So don't sue my ass, okay? But but that's part of the excitement too. And me and a couple of friends of mine, we're big into security, and we believe in keeping people safe, and we will do our best to keep people safe. But I also want to let people know that the streets, they're not always safe.
Mm-hmm. I also think if you could like designate what spots you're going to check out, if there is a sketchy one and you go missing, there could be an alert sent, and then who set the stamp
Absolutely.
and who's going there. So it'd be really easy. It'd
Yeah.
be easier for people to get you help, I think,
You'll
as well.
still have a casualty. You'll still have a potential casualty, however, right?
You will, yeah, you can't address the immediate concern, but let's say we take the rape example, you won't live in the basement that long.
Exactly.
Which, I mean,
exactly.
there's degrees of bad that's less bad.
Right. I like that.
Do you one question I have, I'll give us like three, 4 questions, we'll call it, because you've been giving me so much of your night, even though this has been really exciting.
Right.
With a population of scouts, is it possible to do an so I know that we talked about how like there's certain, like if you have a certain ethnicity, maybe you won't fit in other places because you just don't of the crowd. I wonder if there are people that can fit into any environment, and then like how they do that, and you can like research and then like present that as other things that would help scouts like discern more things. I don't know, is it possible to do meta learning on people who could go anywhere with your scout database?
Right. So I once met a scout who was he was an actual spy. And he was half Jewish, half Muslim. And he kind of looked both,
Mm.
Um, and because he was half Jewish, half Muslim, and he spoke both languages, he was able to go deep in both worlds. So I think that was a unique situation where a person has a unique combination of backgrounds and they're able to infiltrate multiple worlds that normally a person can only infiltrate one, if any. You know, there are plenty of people who are not Jewish or not Muslim, so they can't infiltrate neither world, right? But here's a person who can infiltrate two worlds that most people can't even infiltrate a single one. So I have met people who could infiltrate multiple worlds, but I don't think a person can infiltrate all worlds. That's impossible. That's
Mm.
why it's so important that scouts are diverse. That they come from all backgrounds, all shapes, and diversity goes beyond ethnicity, right? I think there's mental diversity as well.
Yeah.
So I want scouts to be as diverse as possible, but I have met, like you said, people who are perhaps more flexible, and yeah, that's an interesting observation. So I'm not trying to like give cheesy compliments, but that's a really good sign of intelligence. If you could make connections with rapidity, if you can infer connections with rapidity, that's a high sign of intelligence. So you're a smart guy. Put that shit to good use.
Well, I went to college at a place where like a student died every semester,
Jesus
and
Christ.
there were like shootings and whatnot. But I would walk around at like 2 in the morning, and I never had a problem. I was like like walking down dark
Wait,
alleys and
did
stuff.
you grow up in a hood too? What's up?
No, I grew up on a farm, but I went to college at a place that had like a second chance program, which then brought a lot of drug people over, and they started like peddling it.
Right, my kind of people.
Uh,
right,
I had a sauna with a drug dealer once, like a
right,
kingpin. He was like
right.
he was the son of the head of a Latin King organization,
Oh,
and
dope.
I was sitting in a sauna after working out, and he was talking
Mm.
about how happy he is to go to school to have a
Right.
different life than his father. I was like, this is a really neat conversation.
Right.
But I mean, he was darker skinned. So
Well, remember too, right? Just people in the underworld. Not
yeah,
everybody in the underworld is bad people, right? Like there are
yeah,
plenty of people in the underworld that are good people, and there are plenty of people in the corporate world that are bad people, like
yeah.
make you
They're everywhere.
sick bad, right? So I think a lot of the time when people look at drug dealers or prostitutes or whatever, they immediately think, oh, these people are like they're the wretched of the earth, they're bad people. No. A
They're just
lot of
trying to
them
get
are
by.
good people, right? A lot of them are good people. It's not even they're trying to get by. Some of them love this shit. So I don't want you to see it like, oh, they're just trying to get. Some of them are for sure. Some of them are probably more so in the world of prostitution and drug dealing. But a lot of them know that's what they were meant for. They love the street life. They don't want to be part of the main economy, right?
Mm,
But they're good people. Likewise, I've met plenty of people in the main economy in corporate environments that'll make you puke. That's how sick and evil they are. So no, just drug dealers are not necessarily bad, fucked up people. There's plenty of them that are good. There are plenty of people who do underground activities that you'd sit down and have a good time with them. I really mean that.
yeah. I met like a 6 foot tall guy with tattoos all over his body in an alley,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd think that you'd be scared in that scenario, but I was like, no, he looks friendly.
Right.
So I just started talking to him. It was a very interesting conversation. He was
Right.
going to a party.
I felt like a lot of these people, they grew up, they're tough because they had to be tough.
Yeah,
They
especially
had
if
to
they're
be
big
tough.
people. Big people
Mm-hmm.
usually are pretty sensitive. They
Oh,
know
really?
that they're big. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. I've noticed that like if they're, I've always been friends with the big kids. So then
Mm-hmm.
like, and then like no, everyone would leave me alone.
Right.
Even though I'm kind of apparently I'm big too. I never realized this, but um, yeah, big people generally they know that they're big, and so they tend to be a little cautious around people in terms of like
Right.
their physicality. Um, I have like most of the people I know that are over 6 foot, like it takes a little effort for them to be physical with people because they're just always concerned they're gonna crush them,
Oh,
or
wow. Wow.
whatever. I don't know how it
Wow.
works in lovemaking, but they find a way. But
Right.
yeah, like
Right.
even in football, I played football, and the biggest guys were ones that like needed a little coaching to like let it out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy. Yeah, that makes sense. That
yeah.
makes sense. I mean,
Big hearts,
right,
big
right,
bodies.
right. Right. Now, I love the streets, man. I love the streets. You meet some of the greatest people. I'll tell you why I love the streets. I love the streets because you meet very colorful people. They blow your mind. Their life is so dynamic. I think that's the
Hmm.
word, dynamic. There's a lot of life in these people, as opposed to like a lot of the people that I've met in the mainstream economy or at top schools. They're so used to following rules. They're so used to
Mm.
living in a box that their life is not as dynamic. They're not dynamic people. There's not a lot of life there. So I don't romanticize the streets. Like, I know a lot of people, especially in the rap community, there's rappers who never grew up in the streets. They become rich and then all of a sudden they want to be gangsters. That's ridiculous to me. That's a step back, like why, you know what I mean? Like, I never understood that. Like, why would you take a step back like that? So I think they take a step back like that because they don't understand that a lot of these people who are tough, they do it not because they wanted to. They had to, you know? You could never like just start claiming you tough when you weren't forced in that environment. So I don't have any romantic ideas about the streets. I think a lot of the people who are tough, like a lot of street tough people, they had to survive, and we should admire them for that. But like, for us to try to like, regress back like that's I think there's a lot of stupidity in how people view the streets. So I think a lot of people, especially in the hip-hop community, they romanticize the streets, and I don't romanticize the streets. I think the
Mm.
streets has good elements, bad elements, crazy elements. What I like about the streets is not the fact that there's a bunch of guys running around being tough. I could give a shit about that. What I like about the streets is that the people you meet there, they're a lot more dynamic. These are people who don't live in a box. They're a lot more free. They speak their heart. There's less filters. They're more fun to be around. That's really what it comes down to, as opposed to like a person who's so used to following the rule and playing the game so they could rise the social ladder of society. They don't display that same dynamism. They're not as alive because they're so used to following a protocol to move up in a corporate hierarchy or to get in the best Ivy League schools or whatever. um they're sterile in a sense, as
Hmm.
opposed to people that I know in the streets. They're full of life, they're creative, they're much more dynamic. And here's the funny part: a lot of the rich people I met, they have more in common with street people than the middle class. I feel like the middle class, a lot of the time, I struggle to connect with them the most because a lot of the time the middle class, they tend to live in that box. But a lot of the rich people that I've met, they tend to be they tend to disregard the rules a little bit more. And when you look at people who are in the streets, they do the same thing. They disregard the rules of society a little bit more. And I think those two have a lot in common, oddly enough. So the rich folks and the street folks, I think they have way more in common than meets the eye.
Hmm. It's interesting. The phenomenon you described, my wife, my wife and I have a term for it. It's called fighting for beige. Fighting for beige when you try to be like other people and you allow yourself to be homogenized by the pressures of what other people will think about you. And most of the
Mm-mm.
time, people don't give a shit. They don't. Most people, even if you did the thing that you
Right,
think that people would care about, they don't care. But like
right,
so many
right.
times, people just don't even make the leap. I call it
Mm-hmm.
fighting for beige. And so every now and again, like last week, someone was trying to have an argument with me about beige, like a beige subject, and I literally just started saying I never fight for beige. I never fight for beige.
Right,
And I
right,
ended
right,
I
right,
ended the discussion. It was like, this is beige. You
right, right.
decide and leave me alone. It's like I've heard people who will have like discussions on like what side to put the toilet paper, like
Mm.
inside or outside. It's like, that's beige. Figure it out on your own. I don't
Right,
care.
right, right.
Like,
There. Speaking of which, speaking of beige, there is a street character I don't like. I think
mm,
there are street characters where that's all they know is the streets.
yeah.
That's their box. Their box is. I know people in New York. Their entire world is 53rd to 59th.
Mm,
That's their entire world. So there are people where like, just like I told you, the middle class is stuck in a box. of political correctness and stuff like that, there are people who are so caught up in the street world that they're stuck in that box.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really click with those kind of streets people neither, because they're an automaton to me, just like, you know, a lot of the middle class people like me. They're so caught in the game, they think the game is real, the street game is real. So there are the base phenomenon you talk about. It also happens in the street, believe it or not, where like I did an episode in a prison called Rikers Island, and it's a prison in New York. And some of the shit these guys were doing to each other, some of the fatalities they were doing to each other in Rikers Island is outright just disgusting. I mean, throwing like boiling, scorching hot water in people's face to like melt their fucking face off type shit, right? They were doing that kind of shit at Rikers. All for street cred. All for, I mean, they're so lost in a game, you know? They're so lost in a game of like violence and dominance and outdoing each other's fatality, splitting people's face open, you know, that, you know, but they're destroying themselves and each other, right? So these people, they're stuck in that box of the streets. So just because someone is necessarily a street person doesn't necessarily mean like they're not stuck in a box neither. I've met that. I've met street people who are stuck in a box, and I tend to avoid those as well. But generally speaking, I would argue people who are like in the underworld have a lot more dynamism than people who are in a mainstream economy. And there's another reason for that too, because they're on their own and consequences are more real time. I mean, you do some shit in the street, it could get you killed. As opposed to in a corporate world, you spread a rumor, you don't have to worry about someone coming back to buck you down. You know?
Yeah, in most cases they wouldn't even have any repercussions for it. They
right.
just make false claims.
Right, exactly. So a corporate person is domesticated, as opposed to like a street person. It's a wild animal. It's a natural animal. I shouldn't say wild, because wild implies like uncontrollable. It's a natural person, as opposed to like a person who's stuck behind corporate walls. This is a domesticated person, right? So that's why I like the streets. That's why I fuck with people from the streets. I don't romanticize this shit, and I'm only saying that because I'm tired of seeing rappers pretend to be gangsters carrying guns to airports. This shit is just ridiculous.
Yeah. There was a Channel 5 documentary on like a new type of rap that's in Chicago where they glorify violence in particular. I'll have to check. I'll send it to you. It's like really.
Is it drill music?
Yes, drill rap.
Yeah,
drill something. Yeah.
Come on, man. I'm on this shit. Yeah. By the way, I love drill music. Yeah, I love drill. There's a rapper I listen to called PGF Nook. I love drill music. You know what I'm saying? So
they all have really cool names.
Right. Listen, I'm part of the problem too. you just prove I'm part of the problem. I'm not perfect, right? I'm part of the problem too, because I love gangster rap and I love drill music, but culturally it's toxic. And unless you have a strong mind, you could easily take this shit seriously. And those who don't have a strong mind will take shit like that seriously. And it'll destroy themselves. But fortunately, I have a strong mind. I can understand this is just music and this is just games. But weak minds don't. And it fucks them up.
Yeah. I think to your point, it's like separating the art from the artist. If they, at a certain point, one influences the other a little too much. And you're saying that you can have that art that's really good that you enjoy listening to, but you don't want, you're tired of the artist like living it for the sake of it to try and like rectify the difference.
No, I think if an artist is a real street dude, that's fine. But I've seen many artists, right? Many artists, exactly. Like for an example, Lil Wayne. I mean, come on, like, you know, that guy, he was making money since he was a kid, right? I mean, he got signed to Cash Money, I think, when he was 13, 14 or whatever. So you can't really say this is a guy who had to like fight for survival, you know? So this guy's been making money since he was a kid, yet he's participating in gangs and carrying guns to airports. Like, you know, like, why do you need to carry a gun? Like, you don't
have for long.
Right. You know, but he's trying to project a persona, and he's trying to promote a life. That's a step back. I mean, the whole point of getting rich is so that you don't have to carry a gun. You could live in a safe area. That's the whole point. right? You get rich to live in a safe area and not have to carry a gun. For you to get rich and go get a gun and bring it to the airport, that's backward thinking, right? And you're making fun of people who have to carry a gun to survive. That you think they want to carry a gun? Most of them don't. They don't want to fucking have to worry about like who's gonna attack me and I have to defend myself, right? So like, I think these people, they take things that real people have to do out of necessity and they glorify it and commercialize it and they turn it into a subculture that has very negative consequences in a lot of young people.
Hmm. Yeah, I listen to really boring music.
What do you listen
I get
to?
Earlier today I was listening to a guy named Claudio Monteverdi. He's from the 1600s.
Right,
He
right.
makes like music for like churches. I think
Oh,
it's
that's pretty
nice.
dope.
You know, it's meditative. But I was listening to Rise Against the other day, and like I like the 50 Cent guy. He makes nice music.
Are you a Christian?
I was raised Lutheran, but I don't know if I am anymore. I don't know.
Okay.
I think there's like structurally probably something that is a god in the universe, and that's
Right,
what
right.
physics is. But I don't
Right.
know if he has a personality.
That's a great point. By the way, my headphone is dying. I have one earplug left. So if you have
Okay.
more questions, let's get them out of the way because I may have like 5 minutes on this because like this is already
Okay. Yeah.
dead. So this is
We can
right.
wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can. So the last two questions are: we talked a little bit about your tech stack. Was there anything else that's in your tech stack for what you're building that you don't mind sharing, just so that other people can get excited about it?
Right. So I'm on GitHub, by the way. So anyone who
Yeah.
wants to see like what code I'm pushing could find me on GitHub. My username is Sinquain. Uh, right now, Cityscape is mostly built in Swift. You know, I'm using Swift UI in a combined framework, which is based on, it's basically reactive programming. It's based on publishers and subscribers. And I'm also using a lot of Node.js
Yeah.
for like my cloud functions, and that's it really. It's all built natively in Apple Swift language, with their latest frameworks. Like I said, Combine is one of their latest framework. Apple recently came out with async await. I don't know how familiar you are with, well, you write JavaScript, you should know what
Yeah.
async await is.
Yep.
And Apple just came out with that syntax now, so it feels incredibly familiar, similar to writing JavaScript. And I don't know if you know what asyncs are. They're awaits
It's a
are
return
suspension.
promise, right?
They're suspension points. You should just see them as suspend. Promise is something else. A promise is basically like it allows you to basically catch results. They're both asynchronous programming, by the way,
Yeah.
100%. But I think how you handle, as a matter of fact, async await are basically promises made easy,
Yeah.
right? Because
then you don't get the
right,
dot
right.
then.
Right. You don't have a callback hell or any situation. You don't have a bunch
Yeah.
of dot then, dot then, dot then, dot catch finally, right? So like await allows you to handle promises much better, right? Because you
I
would
like
use
it. Yeah.
await to handle a promise, right? Because whatever the promise returned would come in your await response. But I think await, you should just see them as suspension points in your code. And I talk to a lot of like developers and they struggle with that. And just see async awaits suspension points in your code, right? Return to this. Don't finish until this is done.
Yeah. Don't let it
Right?
block
And
you.
right, that might take 5 minutes, that might take 10 minutes, but the function shouldn't finish until this is done. Suspension points in your code. The reason why I say that is because a lot of the time people write very interesting code after their await calls that never gets executed until that promise is returned, right? And they wonder what the hell is going on. Well, you have a suspension point up there, so that's why it's not being executed at when you want it executed. So asynchronous programming is actually a little bit more trickier than people think because you're putting suspension points in your code and they might not always run when you want them to run. So handle them with kid gloves is what I say. But yeah, that's what I'm using right now. Lots of Swift, lots of Node.js, and like I said, I'm currently learning Plutus, which is based on Haskell for Cardano smart contract writing.
It's interesting. Yeah, I consider Node just JavaScript because it's very similar, even though like it has different functions.
Well, no, there's just JavaScript on a back
Yeah,
end, right? On the server side,
yeah,
right? So yeah, it
yeah,
is JavaScript.
yeah. I
But
was lazy, so I
I
just learned
usually say
JavaScript so far.
Node. The reason why I say Node, right? Because I see JavaScript when I use JavaScript for the front end, I'm typically traversing the DOM, right? And I'm typically
Yeah,
doing cool things. As opposed to when I'm using Node.js, I'm not worried about traversing a DOM. I'm not worried
yeah,
about DOM manipulation, right? So
yeah.
I'm
Just
in a
data or
whole
something.
right. I'm in a very different mindset, right? I'm worried about cores errors, and I'm worried about very different stuff writing Node.js than I am worrying about vanilla JavaScript or React. I'm not
Okay, I
worried
see.
about props and state, right? So yeah, that's why I say Node.js, because that framework puts you in a very different mindset than if you
Yeah.
were using React or vanilla JavaScript.
hmm Uh, you did say that you were like all alone in terms of like building a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking for people to join your team? Is there anyone you're looking for that maybe someone listening would know them, or are you
Yeah,
looking for?
totally.
You need help?
I'm looking for scouts. That's number one,
Yeah.
of course. So if you're an explorer and you would like to help me build this platform, I'm looking for you. You could reach me via James at cityscape.com. Um, yeah, James at cityxcape.com. Do not use a S in a cityscape. So it's CityXcape. So James at cityscape.com. If you're a scout, please, shoot me an email. I'm looking for explorers that would help me build this platform. I'm also looking for an investor or multiple investors, right? I'm currently in a seed round, perhaps. I'm looking to raise like $1 million.
Yeah.
And that could be done by one investor, that could be done by two. But I'm looking for an investor, preferably with a tech background, because this is a Silicon Valley company. And in terms of developer, if I am looking for an Android developer, because right now the application is only on iOS. I cannot maintain two code base. So
That's what interns are for.
right, exactly. No, this is
No,
way
that's a
too
joke. That
sophisticated,
yeah.
right,
No, that's
for
a
an intern.
at my last startup, we were bringing interns in because I wanted to help get. I like the idea of like raising up your team versus just
Mm-hmm.
always hiring externally,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever I hire somebody, I have a very clear like people are working within like 30 minutes of being onboarded because I just have created the docs in such a way where they don't have to like, oh, I'm just doing stupid shit for the first 2 weeks.
Smart man.
And so I was asking, oh, what can we have interns do? If you're like, oh, they can maintain the shit. It's like, does that build their skills and reveal things about their character that would make us want to work with them and like make them like increase their value? And they were like, I don't know. I mean, it's
Right,
worthy to do a little bit, but it was like kind of just like a joke.
right. Interns have no place in Cityscape right now. Zero. It's just too hard for even a junior developer, to be honest.
One time
So
I hired a guy. I hired two people at the same time. One of them was a senior engineer. One of them was an intern. 2 weeks later, I asked the team who they thought they were, like what they're, because I never really go into titles to say like you're responsible for this, etc. They guessed the intern was the senior engineer.
how
He
is
works
that
at
person a
Facebook now.
senior? How is that person a
It
senior
was it
engineer
was
then?
the it was the energy. Well, the other guy, he was a senior engineer in a different way. Like he was not long for the company. Um,
Right.
he was good at like talking the interview game. That is all I'll say. That's all I'll
Oh, that
say.
was great. That was great. I tell people all the time, like so many people fake engineering. Some of my friends who are not from Silicon Valley, I tell them all the time, like I've seen so many fake devs, man. It's unreal. But
Oh, okay. You want to hear the?
go
I'll
ahead.
trade us the worst thing, and then maybe this will be the last thing we say. But
Right.
I had someone who had headphones in being told the answers, and we could
Oh my
hear the person,
God.
we could hear the individual pausing, going and the person saying the
Oh
correct
my
response,
God.
and we were like, hey, is there someone like talking, or do you have like someone on the phone? And they're like, what? No, and they just turned it down. And then we asked a question that if you knew the information, you would just answer it really quick, like just
Right.
obvious stuff, like maybe like promises or something. And they were like,
Right.
JavaScript.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I have
That's
better quality
awesome.
control now, so
Right,
that was
right,
good.
right, right. That is
Uh,
awesome. One of the things I think people in interviews don't ask enough is I think they don't ask about protocol oriented programming enough, right? Because like
hmm.
I mean they call them protocol in Swift, but in a programming language like Java, they call them interfaces. And I think a lot of the time interviewers focus too much on like an algorithm problem, or
Oh yeah, I never do any
they
of that.
ask some sophisticated, array question like what's the difference between map or flat map or compact map. But I think protocol oriented programming and also asynchronous programming, there's a lot of disasters that happen there. So there should definitely be more focus on asynchronous programming and protocol oriented programming. There's also a new pattern which is called a coordinator pattern
Hmm.
that Apple recently came out with. I don't know if people are asking those kind of questions in interviews now, but if you're interviewing for Swift, you should definitely ask people about the coordinator pattern. Definitely
Yeah, I've
question
heard
them
of
on
it before.
subscribers and publishers too, because subscribers and publishers, we used to, like back in the old days of UI Kit, we used to use these things called bindables to
Hmm.
have like reactive state programmings. They were fucking brutal. I'm not even gonna get to Objective C, which is like, oh god, you know, where you had to literally manually collect memory, like you had to manually garbage handle, as opposed to like now there's this thing called a capture list where you could like deallocate things in a memory just using a capture list. You could have weak references. Objective C, you had to manually deallocate shit. I cannot explain how hard that was, but like not hard, it was just really painstaking. But anyway, I felt like programming has changed so much to much more real time reactive. If data's flowing so much faster that I think if you're hiring anyone in like the iOS stack, be sure to drill them on publishers and subscribers, and be sure to drill them on like protocol oriented programming, because that's super fucking important for iOS. And we're
Hmm.
so used to object oriented programming questions that we forget that like POP, that's the short for it, protocol oriented programming, is also a real fucking thing. And like I said, it's not secluded to the world of Swift. Java has them too. They're just called differently. They're called
Hmm.
interfaces usually. But yeah, it might sound like I know what I'm doing, but I don't. I'm just as clueless as the man next door. And whoever's listening to this should wish me good luck, because I definitely would like to take Scout life to the next level.
Hmm.
So that's about it. I'll need as much help as I can, and don't let this confident voice fool you. I'm just as clueless as you. I'm navigating all this, you know, day by day. So wish me good luck.
Thank you for joining us today with the Learn with Lowell show. Check us out at learnwithlowell.com. Anywhere podcasts can be found, subscribe. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Check us out on YouTube in particular. It's a new thing I'm doing. Timestamps and links are in the show notes. Thank you for coming, and I hope every one of you found something today that you're curious about to learn more about, and you'll go out and be curious and learn something new.